CD7. What kind of a girl do you want me to be? Do you want me to act common? No. You're classy and elegant. The kind of woman an SS officer would be pleased to be seen with. Grace stared at Bill in astonishment. SS? That will be dangerous. I've done this before, and yes, it is risky. But it could give me more chance of being invited to the chateau. We're fairly sure social functions are being held there, but it's what they're doing in the grounds we need to know. The security is too tight for it just to be a place for officers to relax. Any questions? She pursed her lips in thought. I have been given some French clothes, but nothing classy and elegant. I've chosen a couple of outfits for you. All the things we will need, together with a wireless set, will be dropped with us. The resistance will be waiting to take us to a safe house. If you're supposed to be on leave, we won't be able to stay around too long. It will be suspicious. 5 days at the most. It will be essential not to arouse any doubts about us. I don't want you to give any indication that you understand German. We will have to put on a convincing show of being lovers, but be assured that I would never take advantage of you. Bill paused and sighed deeply. I lie. If I thought I had the slightest chance with you, I'd certainly take advantage of the situation. But you already have several men waiting patiently for the right time to step in. Grace stared at him in astonishment. What on earth are you talking about? Nothing you need worry about yet. I'm going to sit back and watch to see who wins. You're talking nonsense. Are you all right? First class. So, do you think you'll be able to convince everyone we're madly in love with each other? I'll put on a winning performance, one that will even convince you. Bill tipped his head back and laughed. I look forward to that. They were both laughing when a man entered the room and walked towards them. Good to hear laughter, he said, sitting next to them. People are usually tense and subdued at this point. I'm Joe, your pilot. The forecast's for perfect weather, and we'll leave in 2 hours' time. We're ready. I'm Bill, and my partner's Grace. Pleased to meet you. We should have a smooth flight, and we'll try to drop you in the right place, Joe joked. That would be appreciated, Bill replied dryly. See you in a couple of hours, then. Time to get into our kit, sweetheart. Bill held out his hand to pull her out of the chair. Just getting in a bit of practice. Thank you, my love. Grace laughed. It was then she realised what he was doing. All this light-hearted nonsense had been to put her at her ease while they waited. He knew how to handle these situations, and her confidence grew. If anyone could make this a successful mission and keep them alive, then it was Bill. I do have one more question. He stopped walking and turned to her. Now's the time to ask. How do we get back? That is what the wireless is for. They will, hopefully, send in a Lysander for us. It all depends on the situation, and if we're in trouble, we might have to scramble a bit. He cast her an amused glance. But I understand you're quite good at that. Her mouth twitched at the corners. She knew who he'd been talking to. By scramble, I take it you mean we might have to find our own way back? Could happen. He patted his pocket. I've got a compass with me. Oh, good, she replied, grimacing. That's a comfort. Too close to the trees. Grace braced herself, gasping in relief as she skimmed past them and landed with a crash. Her parachute had snagged on a branch, but fortunately it had broken and come down with her. That had been too close to disaster. As she sat on the ground, winded, a couple of men silently appeared and began to gather up her chute. Strong hands were pulling her up. Are you injured, Grace? No, I'm all right. But I made a lot of noise, she said, relieved to see Bill. Are we safe? Think so. But we'd better not hang around. Bill began to help the 2 men roll up the parachutes and hide them. They worked quickly and silently until there was no sign anyone had been there. Grace looked around anxiously and was relieved to see that the resistance men had found their precious wireless and other supplies. Bill hoisted the pack onto his back and took her arm as the men beckoned them to follow. It was at least a mile-long walk, Grace estimated, and she was pleased when a building came into sight. Although it was dark, there was no mistaking that they were on a farm, because she could just see the outline of a couple of barns. They were ushered through a door, and when the lamps were relit, they were in a large kitchen filled with people. One man grinned. "Hello, Bill. What the devil are you up to this time?" "Harry, I thought you were back in England." "Got delayed." Harry studied Grace for a moment and then smiled. "Welcome to France." "Thank you. My name is Grace, and I'm pleased to be here, I think." A deep chuckle rumbled through Harry, and she couldn't help noticing what an attractive man he was. He was around 6 feet in height, with black hair and deep blue eyes. She realised with a shock that she was finding this type of man very appealing. Men with physical and mental strength, like Dan, James, Bill, and Harry, and just the type whose chances of surviving this war were slim. Harry turned his attention back to Bill. "I guess you are here to have a look at the chateau. We haven't been able to get anywhere near the place. I thought they might send you, but you usually work alone, so why have you brought Grace with you?" "She's my French lover who's showing me the countryside of her childhood while I'm on leave. She used to visit as a child with her parents, and it's one of her favourite places." Frowning deeply at that news, Harry asked, "Are you intending to go in the front door?" "It's the only way left. Everything else has been tried." "That's crazy, and it's going to be damn dangerous," Harry said, looking straight at Grace. "We know that, Harry," she told him. He nodded, and then turned his attention back to Bill. "If you do gain entrance and your identities are discovered, we won't be able to help you. We wouldn't want or expect any of you to put yourselves in danger because of us. When we leave here, we're on our own." "I don't like it, Bill. You could both be throwing away your lives for nothing. It might turn out to be just a glorified brothel for the officers. The feeling is that it is too well guarded for that, but you could be right. If that is the case, then we can forget it. But we have to know, Harry. Now, will you introduce us to our hosts?" The sound of voices speaking softly woke Grace, and she opened her eyes. In the early morning light, she could see Bill and Harry leaning against a sturdy beam in the barn loft, deep in discussion. She remained quite still, listening to the various noises of the farm awakening at dawn, and savoured the smell of the fresh straw that she'd been sleeping on. She had spent the night with 2 very attractive men, and it had seemed a perfectly normal thing to do. Bill was right. They were living in extraordinary times. Never in their wildest dreams had she and Helen imagined they would be involved in anything like this. Her life with Brian had seemed so straightforward. They would both work until they had enough money to buy a small house, then there would be a couple of children, and they would grow old together. All those plans, hopes and dreams had been cruelly swept away. This was her life now, a life where there was no room for future plans or emotional attachments. The need to win this war was all that mattered, and she would do whatever was asked of her. "Are you awake, Grace?" Bill asked softly. "Just about." She hauled herself up to a sitting position. "What time is it?" 6 o'clock. We'll go to the house now to wash and change into our other clothes. Harry's going to get us a car, and after breakfast, we'll be on our way." "How are we going to get a car, Harry?" she asked. He gave a lopsided grin. "Don't ask. See you later." Harry eased through the hatch. "Be careful," she said. His head reappeared. "Always." After breakfast, Grace had a good wash in a rather primitive outhouse, and then dressed in a plain navy blue frock. It fitted perfectly, and its simplicity made it quite elegant. The grandmother of the family insisted on setting her hair in an appropriate style. "Now you look French," she said with satisfaction. Suddenly, the elderly woman threw her hands up in horror, making Grace spin round to see what had alarmed her. The man who had just come into the room made her gasp, and she had to look closely to reassure herself that it really was Bill. She had once accused him of being a terrible actor, but there would be no doubt that this man was a German SS officer. "Oh, Bill, you gave us a fright!" Harry returned at that moment, stopped when he saw Bill, and after a short pause he shook his head. "Damn it, man. You're so convincing I nearly shot you." "You hesitated too long. If it had been the real thing, you would have lost your chance. Did you get the car?" Reprimand accepted, Harry told him. We couldn't get you a German one, but it's a decent French car, and the tank is almost full of petrol. Be sparing with it because we can't get any more. We've changed the number plates and the appearance of it as much as we could. It's round the back of the barn. There is also a room booked for you, at the only hotel in the village. Harry eyed Bill up and down. Not good enough for an SS officer, of course, but you must have a base for your supposed leave. Bill inclined his head, and as Grace watched, it was obvious he had completely switched to the character of the officer. There was a ruthless look about him, and when he turned to examine her appearance, she wasn't sure she liked this man with the cold eyes. "Will I do, mon amour?" she asked, lifting her head and meeting his gaze, while reminding herself that she had to act as if she was in love with him. She smiled. "Or would you like me to change into something else?" He walked round her, inspecting her from every angle, then came to stand in front of her to run his fingers down her cheek. "Don't be intimidated by the role I'm playing, Grace. I just wanted to see if I'm convincing enough. You look beautiful." Grace actually shivered. Although Bill had smiled, there hadn't been any warmth in his eyes. "Oh, you're convincing, Bill. But you're still going to have to be damn careful and not let the role drop for a second, or they'll have you." Harry looked concerned. "I don't like this idea at all. It isn't just your life you're chancing this time." "This is something I can't do on my own, Harry, and it wasn't my idea." "No, I don't suppose it was. You take risks, but you always have an escape route. This time you haven't. I just hope it's going to be worth it." "We won't find out, standing around here. Time to go," Bill said, shaking hands with the family who had helped them. The grandmother kissed Grace on the cheek, but said nothing. "Be safe," Harry told them, as they walked out of the door. "And Grace, be prepared to be scorned when the French see you on the arm of such a man. You'll be looked upon as a traitor by many." "I understand, but thank you for the warning, Harry." "That family took a chance with us being there, and we didn't even know their names," Grace said, as Bill drove the car out of the farm. "They have been told that what we're doing is very risky, so what we don't know we can't reveal if we're caught. If you're questioned, you met me at a hotel in Paris, where you work as a receptionist. It's used by high-ranking German officers, so you can't give the name for security reasons. We have been lovers for almost a year, but I've never talked about myself or what I do. Whatever happens, don't let your guard drop for a second." "Understood. I'll be very careful. I'd like both of us to come out of this alive." "If I get into trouble, you must try to get away. Don't wait for me. I'll meet up with you when I can. You are not to put yourself in danger by wondering what has happened to me. Harry is waiting at the farm, and he'll take you to safety." "Let's hope that won't be—" Grace stopped talking abruptly. "There's a roadblock, up ahead." "I've seen it. Smile nicely and remember you can't understand German." They were waved down, and Bill stopped. When he got out of the car, the soldiers on guard snapped to attention, and while Bill was talking to one of them, the other walked towards the car. Grace smiled, pretending she didn't understand what he was saying. Bill strode over and told her, in appalling French, that she had to show her papers. It was routine. Talking to Bill rapidly, she handed over her fake papers for inspection. Bill distracted the guard by shaking his head and saying that he couldn't understand what she was saying when she gabbled like that, making the guard laugh. After giving her papers only a cursory glance, he handed them back. The other guard had been on the field telephone, and Bill went over to him. Grace couldn't hear what was being said, but when the soldier saluted again and Bill came back to the car, relief flooded through her as the barrier was lifted to allow them to continue their journey. Once they were well away, Bill said, "The chateau is a mile away, and someone will be there to meet us." Tall iron gates had been erected at the entrance, and barbed wire was stretched around the perimeter as far as the eye could see. There was also a tower, and on top were guards with a mounted machine gun. Not surprising, the resistance hadn't been able to get near, and the place had caught their interest back home. Her insides churned uncomfortably. Bill was taking an enormous risk, but he appeared quite relaxed about it. "Stay in the car," he murmured, as he got out and walked over to meet the two officers waiting for him. They talked for about 10 minutes, but it seemed like hours to Grace. When Bill looked across and beckoned to her, she took a deep breath and got out of the car. When she reached them, one of the officers spoke good French and began to ask her about her visits to the chateau as a child. Fortunately, learning about the place had been the final part of her training, so she had a clear picture of it in her mind. Smiling, she told him what she remembered and explained how she had so wanted to visit again. "Disappointing for you, ma chérie," Bill said, "but it is now a military base." Grace nodded and sighed. "I would have liked to sample the wines. Are the vineyards still here, sir?" "They are, but wine is not being produced at the moment. There are ample supplies in the cellars, though. I cannot allow you in today, but there will be a social this evening." He turned to Bill. "Perhaps you would both like to join us." "We would be happy to come. I will tell the guards to expect you, and they will escort you to the chateau." "We will look forward to tasting some of the wines," Bill told him. As they drove away, Bill said, "I can say you are unwell and come on my own." Grace looked at him in astonishment. "No, you won't. We're in this together, and you need me as a distraction." "It's going to be very dangerous. I'll be slipping away from the party to see what I can discover, and our chances of getting out of there again are not high." "I'm coming with you, Bill. Don't start worrying about me. That's just what Stan was concerned about, and it's the worst thing you can do. I'll take my chances just like you." He reached across and squeezed her hand, but said nothing. She took this as acceptance. Chapter 22. They spent the afternoon walking round the village like tourists. It wasn't a comfortable time. An SS officer was regarded with hostility, and Grace had to ignore the looks of contempt thrown her way as she walked arm in arm with him. Even this was dangerous in case someone took the opportunity to get rid of a lone German, but he was supposed to be on leave, and they had to act the part. It was a relief to get back to the hotel. They had brought their luggage with them, including the wireless, not wanting to put the family at the farm at risk of it being discovered. They'd hidden it in the only place available, under the bed. Grace pulled out the one evening frock and hung it up to let the creases fall out. Again, it was a simple style, but elegant, and a shade of blue that matched her eyes perfectly. By 7 o'clock, they were on their way. While they'd been getting ready, Grace's nerves had been jangling, but when they arrived at the chateau, a strange calm settled upon her. She smiled at Bill. "Wonder what the wine is like." "We shall soon find out," he said, laughing softly as he slipped her hand through his arm. "Here we go. If all goes well, we could be on our way home in a couple of days." Grace didn't need to ask what would happen if it all went wrong. She knew, and so did Bill. The main hall was packed with soldiers of every rank and quite a few women among them. Grace scanned the crowd quickly and noted that Bill was the only SS officer present. In one way, that was a relief, because they could have asked too many questions, but the other thing was that this made him stand out from the crowd. The officer they'd met earlier that day came over as soon as they entered the room. "Welcome to our little gathering. Please, help yourself to the food and drink." He smiled at Grace. "Please allow me to let you sample the chateau wines. We have some excellent ones." "Thank you." She smiled enthusiastically as he escorted her to the bar. He gave orders to the barman, who then lined up 6 bottles and small glasses. He poured from the first one and handed it to Grace, asking for her opinion. She took only a tiny sip of each as they worked their way through the selection, knowing she had to keep a clear head. As they discussed the virtues of each wine, Grace blessed James, who had taught her a lot about wines at their frequent business functions. "You are very knowledgeable about wine," he said, giving her an admiring glance. "I like good things." "And your escort can give you those things." Grace glanced across the room and saw Bill talking to a group of men. "He can, and does." "You are the only woman here not adorned with expensive jewels. They expect such gifts." "Trinkets mean nothing to me. I prefer a simple look." This officer was probing her relationship with an SS officer, and Grace knew she must be very careful. He smiled, moving closer. A woman as beautiful as you does not need gaudy embellishments. He was flirting with her. She bowed her head and smiled. A charming compliment, sir. Do you think your escort would mind if I asked you to dance? Is he the jealous type? I would be happy to dance with you, and no, he isn't jealous or possessive. He trusts me. Lucky man, to have found such a treasure, he said, guiding her to the dance floor. During the evening, she danced with several of the officers, and often with Bill, but she avoided talking too much to the women in case they caught any hint that she was not quite what she seemed. Around 11 o'clock, she was dancing cheek to cheek with Bill, who whispered in her ear, They've all been drinking heavily, so I'm going to slip out. Quite a few of the women have been shipped in from the village for the men, and a bus is due to take them back at 12 o'clock. If I don't appear, you are to get on that bus and get out. Don't hesitate. I'll do as you say. He asked one of the waiters where the toilets were, then kissed her cheek and walked out. There was no sign of Bill when the party began to break up, so Grace mingled with the other girls and got on the bus with them. They'd all had a lot to drink, and didn't take any notice of her. She was worried sick about Bill, but he had told her to leave and she must obey his instructions. They'd just driven out of the gate when there was a huge explosion and alarms began ringing. She held her breath, expecting the bus to be stopped and searched, but it didn't happen. Something had gone wrong. And why had there been an explosion? Oh, Bill, if you're still in there, how are you going to get out? When they reached the outskirts of the village, the bus was stopped. A soldier got on and walked along, inspecting each of the women closely. The driver was explaining to another soldier where they'd come from. The girls were lively with drink and joked with the soldiers, so Grace joined in, not wanting to stand out from the others. After every inch of the bus had been searched, they were allowed to continue. Grace bit back a sigh of relief as the bus drove along, but her relief was short-lived. The village was swarming with soldiers searching every home, including the hotel. She was dismayed when she saw one was carrying the wireless set, and another all of their luggage. They were looking for her as well now. The bus stopped in the middle of the village, and they were ordered off and told to return to their homes immediately. They went in different directions, and Grace stayed with 4 who were walking together, all the time looking for somewhere to hide. She couldn't go back to the hotel, and desperately needed somewhere safe where she could decide what to do. Her chance came when she saw a place they had explored on their sightseeing trip. When they reached the narrow passage between 2 houses, she glanced around to make sure they weren't being followed, and then she slipped away from the girls. Once in the passage, she removed her shoes and ran as fast as she could for the trees at the back. The area was rough and overgrown and very dark, but she didn't stop until she was inside the dense forest of trees. The decision when to stop was made for her when she tripped and fell heavily. She stayed on the ground, trying to control her ragged breathing, listening for any sign of pursuit. All was quiet. How long she stayed like that, Grace didn't know, but she eventually sat up and began to assess her situation. It was dire. She was in an evening frock, battered and bruised from her flight through the undergrowth, and the Germans were searching for her. At least she was still free, and she desperately hoped Bill was also hiding somewhere. He had said Harry would be waiting for her if there was trouble, and the obvious place to make for was the farm. That wasn't going to be easy, because the mess she was in meant she could only move at night. She dragged herself to her feet, grimacing with pain, and trying to get her bearings. There was still some of the night left, so she better try to cover some ground before dawn. It was imperative that she got out of this area, so she set off, hoping she was going in the right direction. Dawn was just beginning to lighten the sky when she found a small stream, but as it didn't look too clean, she just moistened her mouth and spat it out. She'd left the trees behind a while ago, and there didn't appear to be anyone around, so she took the chance to try and clean herself up as much as possible. Then she tore a few inches off the frock to make it shorter and draped that piece of material around the neckline to fill it in. From a distance, it should now look more like a summer dress. It wouldn't pass close up, though. Grace crept towards a nearby road, needing to find out exactly where she was. It was a huge relief to see that even in all the confusion she'd been travelling towards the farm. There wasn't far to go, but it was light now and too dangerous to continue. The only place to hide for the day was in a deep ditch by some thick bushes. She climbed into it, covered herself with whatever loose vegetation was available, and closed her eyes to wait out the day. Exhaustion overcame her, and she slept for a while until hunger and thirst woke her up. At last it was dark, and Grace was able to make her way to the farm. 2 hours later, she stumbled through the farm gates, hardly able to stand due to the damage she'd done to her feet on the journey. It had been impossible to wear her flimsy evening shoes over such rough territory. Not wanting to put the family in more danger by going to the house, she headed straight for the barn. Climbing up to the loft took the last of her strength, but she made it and collapsed onto a pile of straw. There were voices. Someone was giving orders. Grace surfaced sluggishly. After all that effort, she'd been caught. "Grace, wake up!" English. Her eyes snapped open and she saw Harry bending over her. When she tried to speak, nothing came out. One of the men from the farm held a bottle of water to her lips and began to give her a sip at a time. "Easy," Harry said, when she tried to take the bottle. "Have some bread as well." The 2 men watched her silently as she tore off lumps of bread and sipped the water. When she'd had enough, she managed to say, "Thank you." "Where's Bill?" Harry wanted to know. "I think he was still at the chateau." Her voice trembled. "I left him behind, Harry. I shouldn't have done that, no matter what he told me to do." "You did the right thing." She shook her head, the enormity of what had happened finally registering with her. "There wasn't anything you could do." Harry gripped her arms, making her focus on what he was saying. "If you had been caught, they could have used you to make him give them information. For his sake and everyone involved, you had to get away. Do you understand?" "I suppose so." "There is no suppose about it, Grace. You had to avoid capture. Bill knows what he's doing. He can look after himself, and being on his own will give him more chance of escaping." Of course she knew that, but it didn't make her feel any better. "There was an explosion. Why would something have exploded?" "Bill must have found something vital and decided to get rid of it there and then." "But he didn't have any explosives with him." "Bill, among many other things, is a demolition expert. If he wanted to destroy something, he would have found a way." "Good heavens, Harry, I'm beginning to realise that I don't know this man." "You're not the only one to feel that way." He laughed. "He's like a chameleon. Now, tell me what happened." The story was soon told, and when she was finished, Harry cursed. "The discovery of the wireless is a real problem. You did well to remain hidden, because after quizzing the hotel owners about your appearance, they'll be searching everywhere for you. We've got to get you away from this area. You'll need new papers and clothes. That will take a few days to arrange. The Germans have already been here, so let's hope they don't come back. Stay here and rest. The family will take care of you. I'll be back as soon as possible." "Is there any chance of letting London know what has happened?" "The area is in uproar, Grace, and we can't risk it. You'll have to tell them when you get back." "How am I going to do that?" "Over the Pyrenees into Spain, and then on to Gibraltar. It's going to be a long, tough journey, so eat, rest, and let your feet heal." Grace looked down at her lacerated feet, grimaced, and held up the shoes she'd been careful not to leave behind. "I couldn't run in high heels, but I'll make the journey, no matter how rough." "I know you will. Bill wouldn't have brought you if he hadn't been sure you were strong enough, mentally and physically. You were here to give Bill a believable reason to be looking around the chateau. You have played your part well, and done exactly what was required of you. Don't feel upset or guilty about leaving Bill behind. What we've got to concentrate on now is getting you home." Chapter 23. Stan Hayden threw the papers aside, stood up and walked over to the window. Those poor devils on the parade ground must be sweltering in this heat, he thought. August, and still no news. The fact that something had gone dreadfully wrong was now undeniable. There hadn't been a communication from either of them. Dear Lord, not both of them. Pain laced through him. If they were on the run, they would have got a message through somehow, even if they'd lost the wireless. If they'd been caught, they would probably have been tortured and then shot as spies. Stan knew that was always a possibility with missions like this, but it didn't make it any easier to bear. And the awful thing was, they might never know exactly what had happened to them. He ran a hand over his eyes. They should only have been in France for 2 weeks at the most. As the days and weeks had passed, hope faded, and now it was clear they weren't coming back. That is what everyone was saying, but Stan refused to let the last shred of hope die. There was a rap on the door, and his temporary assistant looked in. "Colonel Askew asking to see you, sir." Hell, this was going to be awkward. From the way George had spoken about Grace, it gathered he felt protective towards her. "Send him in, Potter." "Yes, sir." "Hello, Stan." George strode in. "Thought I'd pop in to let you know I've been transferred here." "You've managed to get rid of that desk job at last," he joked. "Sit down for a moment. I'll ask Potter to make us some tea." "Thanks. I was hoping to see Grace." "She's in Scotland with Bill at the moment," Stan lied. "When do you expect her back?" "I haven't any idea. It might be some time." George looked at him intently. "From the tone of your voice, I would say you're worried. Why would that be, Stan?" "Remember, I have the highest security clearance, so whatever you say to me will go no further." "You're imagining things. I've got a lot on my mind at the moment, and I'm missing Grace's organising skills, that's all." Stan stood up. "I'll see about that tea." Potter stood up the moment Stan came into the outer office. "Makes a strong pot of tea." "Yes, sir." Stan stood for a moment, trying to wipe the worry from his face. He was going to have to be more careful around George. The fact that Grace and Bill were missing couldn't be hidden for much longer, but he didn't want to say anything until he had definite news, good or bad. He couldn't tell the families that he had no idea what had happened to them. He couldn't. He returned to his office, a smile on his face. "The tea's coming right up. Now, I guess you're back on active duty, so tell me how you managed that." They talked about many things over the next hour, and Stan was able to avoid any conversation about Grace and Bill. He hadn't quite got away with it, though, because as George left, he said, "When you're next in touch with Grace, ask her to write to her parents. They're getting worried." "Will do." They shook hands as George left. Stan knew his story about Scotland hadn't been believed. That had been awkward, and would only get worse now George was stationed here. He had to do something. There was only one thing he could think of, and that was a very long shot, but it would make him feel as if he was doing something useful. It was obvious now that either their wireless set wasn't working or they'd lost it, so it was a case of searching for any snippet of information they could find. Alex Stewart was a good man, and would help if at all possible. Stan dialed a number, and waited. Eventually, Alex came to the phone, and Stan explained the situation to him. "Can your wireless operators help me, Alex? We've tried everything we can to get in touch with them, but you might be able to pick up something from that area." "It isn't very likely after all this time, but I'll ask them to try." "Thanks. Can I have your permission to come there?" "Of course. When do you want to come?" "Now." "Right. I'll alert security. Would you like to stay for a couple of days?" "I'd appreciate that, if at all possible." "No problem. Get here in time for dinner. Jane will be pleased to see you as well." Stan replaced the phone, sat for a moment to gather his thoughts, and then dialed another number. There were a few things he must deal with before he left. An hour later, he had a small bag packed and climbed into the waiting car. "Where to, sir?" "Chicksands Priory, Bedfordshire." "Do you know where it is?" "No, sir, but I'll find it." "I've been there once, so I'll give you directions when we get close." "Nice place, sir," his driver said, as they drove towards the Priory entrance. "I didn't know this was here." "And you still don't know." "Understood, sir." "Will you need me while you're here?" "No, I'm staying for a couple of days. You can return and I'll contact you when I'm coming back." The driver nodded and held open the car door. Alex met him as he entered the building. Good to see you again, Stan. I've got a couple of girls doing sweeps to see if they can pick up any news. Would you like to see the ops room? Very much. I really appreciate this, Alex. Don't thank me yet. It's most unlikely we shall discover anything of use to you, but we'll give it a try. Have you told their families they're missing? No, I've been avoiding that, but I can't put it off much longer. The wireless operators were all WAF and concentrating on what they were doing. No one looked up when they walked in. All women, Stan remarked. Yes, they've replaced the men, releasing them for other work. They're very good. Their patience and concentration is excellent. Stan walked over to one girl and touched her shoulder to gain her attention. She removed her headphone and looked up. Sir? Eileen, I want you to meet Major General Hayden. It's his operatives you're looking for. Anything yet? No. She stood up to face Stan. If there's anything out there, sir, we'll find it. I'm sure you will. Eileen sat down again and resumed her work. Alex looked at his watch. There's still an hour to dinner. Would you like to stay and watch for a while? That would be interesting. Well, if you'll excuse me, I'll come back for you in a while. They'll search through the night as well, Stan. Alex said kindly, and then left the room. Over the next 2 days, Stan spent most of his time in the ops room, fascinated by the skill and diligence of the operators. Collecting information was a vital part of the war effort, and no small detail was dismissed as insignificant. Every time something was picked up, Stan's heart leapt in hope, only to be dashed time and time again. Of course, coming here had been a vain hope, but it was better than waiting in the office, hoping for news. Anything? Alex asked, coming to sit beside him. He shook his head. Not a whisper of anything unusual. Thanks for trying anyway, Alex. The SOE haven't been able to find them, and you were my last hope. I'd better be getting back. Sir? Both men surged to their feet when Eileen called. She was listening intently and shaking her head, frowning deeply. Then she sat back and removed the headphones. They've gone. I could hardly hear it. And there was only a short burst of 2 words repeated once. Do the words "jesters lost" mean anything to you, sir? Stan felt as if he'd been hit in the stomach. Did it say jesters or jester? I couldn't be sure, sir. It wasn't very clear. What does it mean? Alex asked Stan. That either one or both have been captured or killed. Did the sender give his code? It sounded like Saturn, but whoever was sending it was in a hurry and didn't want to transmit for long. That isn't a call sign, I know, and it certainly wasn't sent by Grace or Bill. So how the hell did they know about jesters? They wouldn't have given that information to anyone else. Unless they were forced to, Stan. That would be Stan's worst nightmare. But every angle had to be considered. Someone out there had information only known to the 2 jesters. It's looking bad. That message should only have been sent by one if the other was lost, and then it should have stated Jester 1 or Jester 2, so we would know which one it was. See if you can pick that up again, Eileen. It might be clearer another time. Alex placed a hand on Stan's shoulder. Stay for dinner, and leave in the morning. I would appreciate some company this evening, and I couldn't refuse another of Jane's excellent meals. Thanks, Alex. Now I need to get out of here. Let's walk in the grounds. It's a lovely day. The warmth of the sun and the sound of birds singing were soothing. They walked in silence, and Stan gathered his thoughts. That brief message had only told him that someone he didn't know had sent it. Someone who shouldn't have had knowledge of the jesters, unless Bill or Grace had told them, which was highly unlikely. That pointed to the worst scenario possible. They could have been caught by the Gestapo. If that was the case, he could only pray they died quickly. Are you all right? Alex asked, breaking the silence. Stan nodded and drew in a deep breath. Just thinking things through. I now have confirmation that their mission went terribly wrong, and I must accept they won't be coming back. I can't delay any longer. They must now be listed as missing, presumed dead. As soon as I return to Aldershot, I will tell the families personally. I don't envy you that task. It'll be hard, but it's something I must do myself. I'll contact my driver and leave first thing in the morning. Breaking the news to Bill's family had been bad enough, but he was dreading this. He had left it until the evening to be sure both of Grace's parents would be at home. He knocked on the door. As soon as Ted opened the door, he introduced himself. "May I come in, please? I have something to tell you." Ted nodded and Stan followed him to the kitchen where Jean was preparing dinner. "This is Major General Hayden, my dear." She wiped her hands and, smiling, shook his hand. "Oh, Grace works for you. Would you like a cup of tea?" "Jean." Ted took his wife's arm and made her sit down. "I don't think this is a social call. He has something to tell us." "He's already guessed I'm bringing bad news," Stan thought, frowning. "Oh?" She glanced from one man to the other, noting their sombre expression, and turned pale as the realization hit her. "Grace?" "We've been worried because we haven't heard from her for a while, and that's not like her." "Tell it straight, sir." Grace was asked to carry out a certain task and readily agreed. It is my painful duty to tell you that both Grace and a captain are officially missing. Presumed dead. "That means you don't know for sure," Ted said huskily, putting his arm around his shaking wife's shoulders. "Correct. I have delayed bringing you this sad news in the hope they would be found. They should have returned by the end of June at the latest." "Returned from where?" Jean asked, tears rolling down her face. "Where did she go?" "I can't tell you that, but I can assure you we will continue trying to find out what has happened. The moment there is any news, I will come and tell you. Grace has shown great courage, and you can be proud of her. I know at this time such words are meaningless, but they are true." Stan left the grieving parents and got back into the waiting car. Wherever he went today, he was leaving behind heartbreak, and there was still one more to go. George Askew. How he needed a drink. He also needed to get this unpleasant task completed today, and as luck would have it, he saw George near his office when they arrived back at Aldershot. He got out of the car. "Could you come to my office, George? I need to speak to you." "Ah, there you are. I've been looking for you. Good Lord, man, you look rough. Tough day?" "Couldn't be worse." Once in the office, Stan poured 2 generous glasses of whiskey and took a good swig. George watched, leaving his own drink untouched. "Where's Grace?" he asked firmly. "Bill and Grace are missing. Presumed dead." Stan drained his glass, not knowing what kind of reaction he would get from George. "I see. Have her parents been told?" "I've just come from there. I'm sure they'd appreciate a visit from you." "I'll do that." He took a sip of the drink and then slammed the glass down. "What the hell happened?" "I can't give you details." "Oh, don't give me that security rubbish. Start talking." It didn't take Stan long to relate what little he knew. "We'll keep looking, of course. Arrangements have been made to get another operative into that area to see what they can find out." "Wipe that butt out of your voice, Stan. And don't give up just yet. I'm sure Bill is an expert at avoiding capture and Grace is very resourceful. They won't give up easily." "I'm well aware of that, but you have to admit the signs aren't good." "No, they're not. You find them, Stan, and keep me informed." George stood up. "I'll have to tell Dan." When George left the office, Stan poured himself another stiff whiskey. Thank heavens he didn't have to tell Dan that he'd lost Grace. Chapter 24. "Hello, George." Dan turned the wireless down so he could talk on the phone. "How are things?" "Not good. I have some bad news, Dan." "Oh? What's happened?" Dan listened. his mouth setting in a grim line. Why the hell has Stan waited all this time before letting us know? When he heard the rest of the story, Dan swore fluently under his breath. What a stupid, crazy scheme. They've lost 2 valuable people and gained nothing. Don't tell me to calm down, Uncle. Any fool can see that a mission like that had little chance of succeeding. I'm on embarkation leave now, so I'm coming there in the morning. Stan can tell me what he's intending to do about this. To say they're missing is unacceptable. I know there's a bloody war on, but that's no reason to go throwing good lives away. I'm in the mood to shake some sense into a few people. That's how I feel. George's voice betrayed how upset he was. I'll warn Stan you're coming, and then we can both go and see Grace's parents. Yes, we must. Dan agreed, his fury draining away and leaving him feeling empty. They lost a son-in-law, and now they might have lost their daughter. They must be devastated. And confused. They thought she was safe in an office. When are you shipping out, by the way? 7 days. Let's hope we get some news before you leave. See you tomorrow. And thanks for coming. George watched Dan striding towards him across the parade ground. For such a big man, he moved with fluid grace without a trace of the injury he'd had. You're early. Have you had breakfast? Not yet. Good, we can eat together. Can't face this day on an empty stomach. Dan nodded and followed his uncle to the officers' mess. Do you know where you're going yet? George asked, as they took their seats. Not officially, but my guess would be North Africa. General Montgomery has taken over as commander, and we need a victory to raise spirits. Agreed. The last thing you needed was bad news before shipping out. Take it easy on Stan, though. This is especially rough on him. Remember he's lost Bill as well. Damn shame, I liked him. And you can stop looking so worried, George. I was angry when I heard the news, but I've slept on it. We're going to have to face this situation over and over again before this war's over. I remember the quiet courage Grace showed at the death of her husband, and it's an example to us all. And knowing her, when she was offered this mission, there's no way she would refuse. You're right. She was a remarkable girl. Was? Dan raised his eyebrows. Sorry, is a remarkable girl. That's better. The important word here is missing, and until they have proof they are dead, I'll hold on to that. Dan pushed his empty plate away and stood up. Now, let's go and see Stan. Potter showed them straight in, and after the usual greetings, the 3 men sat down to talk. I was dreadfully sad to hear about Bill and Grace, Dan said. What's been done to find them? Stan explained the situation, and they discussed what action could and was being taken to trace them. They'd been deep in conversation for about an hour when Potter burst into the office. Sir, a dispatch rider's just delivered an urgent message for you from HQ. He said you were to have it at once. Stan took the sealed envelope and frowned at the large red words, for immediate attention, written on it. Excuse me while I read this, he said, as he slit the letter open. Dan watched a mixture of emotions flash across Stan's face as he read the contents of the message. When he'd finished, he put it face down on the desk and closed his eyes for a moment, before opening them again and looking up. Grace is safe. She's made it to Gibraltar after crossing the Pyrenees and Spain. Dan felt a wave of relief and some pride when he heard that. He muttered softly under his breath, That's my girl. Wonderful news. George was smiling until he saw Stan's sombre expression. Is she all right? Is Bill with her? Grace is unharmed, but she came alone. There's still no sign of Bill. We won't know the whole story until Grace arrives. They're going to get her back as soon as possible. By sea, I expect. Don't give up on Bill yet, George told him. They must have had a good reason for separating. He could be right behind her. You're right, and it's a huge relief to know one of them's safe. Stan stood up. Grace's parents must be given the good news at once. Shall we all go, gentlemen? And give the neighbours something to talk about as 3 ranking officers descend upon the house. They walked out of the office, smiling, buoyed up with the chance to give good news for a change. Ted's mouth dropped open when he saw them standing outside, his eyes fixing on the tall man. "Oh, it's so good of you all to come. And it'll do Jean good to see you again, Dan." You're all smiling." "That's because we've got good news," Stan told him. "Grace is safe." "Oh, thank God. Come in, come in." Then he turned and ran down the passage, shouting, "Jean, Grace is safe. She's alive. Jean, where are you? We've got guests. Dan's here as well. Jean!" She came running down the stairs and threw her arms around her husband, laughing and crying at the same time. "Is she all right? Where is she?" "I don't know yet. Look who's here to give us the wonderful news." She rushed up to them and shook Stan's hand, kissed George on the cheek, and hugged Dan. "Where have you been, young man? We've missed you." "They're keeping me busy." "I don't doubt it." She gazed at the officers, crowding the passage, and shook her head. "We'd better go into the front room." "The kitchen will do, Jean," Dan said, taking her arm. "I could do with a cup of your excellent tea." She smiled up at him. "Grace really is safe?" "Yes, and when I see her, I'll give her a good talking to for worrying us all like this." "And she'll tell you to mind your own business," Ted laughed. "Ah, but she can't do that now she's in the army." Dan tapped his shoulder. "I'm an officer. Any cheek and I can have her charged with insubordination." Jean was busy making the tea and turned round to look at Dan. "You do that, young man, and you'll have us to deal with. Do you know, Dan brought Grace home one evening and they were both covered in mud?" "We'd been on manoeuvres with the Home Guard that day." Dan had an amused expression on his face. Jean was never going to forget that. "Well, at least you're clean this time. Sit down, everyone. The tea's ready." They were laughing while they shuffled the chairs so they could all sit down. "Can you tell us where Grace is?" Ted asked Dan as he handed round the cups of tea Jean had just poured. "We haven't got much information at the moment, but I'll tell you what we know. First, I must have your promise to keep this information to yourselves." "We promise," Jean and Ted both nodded. "I received the news this morning that Grace has arrived in Gibraltar." "Gibraltar?" Ted gasped. "What the blazes is she doing there?" "She came from France over the Pyrenees, through Spain and into Gibraltar." "That's incredible!" Jean looked at Stan. "With the captain?" "As far as we know, she came alone, but we're more hopeful now that Bill won't be far behind." Stan didn't let his concern for Bill show, not wanting to spoil their joy at knowing their daughter was alive. Ted was shaking his head. "That girl of ours has some courage. That's why Bill took her with him. He needed someone who wouldn't let him down if things got nasty, and he knew she would keep her wits about her. When Grace arrives home, I must ask you not to press her for details. Too many lives depend upon her silence. You understand?" "We will keep this to ourselves," Ted promised. "Will we ever know the whole story?" "Most unlikely." "I don't care about that." Jean began refilling the empty cups. "Our girl is safe and coming home. That's all that matters. We won't ask questions or expect her to talk about it. She'll need rest and some normal home life without being constantly reminded of what she's been through. She will be given leave, won't she?" "Of course," Stan told them. "Once the debriefing is over, she can come home for as long as she needs. I'll let you know when she's back in this country. It'll probably be a week or so." "Thank you all so much for bringing us this good news. When Brian was killed, all Grace received was a telegram. So impersonal." Jean smiled at Stan. "But you took the trouble to come in person. We really appreciate that kindness." "And I'm delighted to be able to come again with much better news." "I'll come again when Grace is home," George told them. "You're always welcome," Ted replied. "I'm sure Grace would like to see you as well, Dan." "I doubt I'll be here. I'm on embarkation leave at the moment." "Oh dear," Jean looked concerned. "You be careful, young man, wherever you're going." "I will." End of CD 7. CD 8. The men took their leave then and walked out to the waiting car. When they reached it, Stan turned and stared at Dan, a smirk on his face. "Young man?" "So? How can anyone call a great 6.5 feet brute like you young man? You must be 30 at least." "He's 28, actually," George told him with a wide grin on his face, "and he's only 6 feet 4. At least he was the last time we measured." "You'd better measure again, George. He's still growing." "Do you think so? Have you got a tape measure with you?" "Will you two stop analysing me and get in the car? The neighbours are beginning to wonder what 3 army officers are finding so funny. They'll be rushing into Ted and Jean's house to find out what's going on. Jean likes me, and in her eyes I am a young man." A devilish look crossed Dan's face. "If you two elderly gentlemen would get in the car, I might consider buying you lunch." "Watch it, young man. We outrank you. Get in, Stan, and you, Uncle." "How'd you manage him?" Stan asked, as he climbed in the back of the car with George, leaving Dan to sit in front where there was more room for him. "He's quite docile, really, as long as he's giving the orders." "Good officer material, then," Stan chuckled. "He'll probably end up as a brigadier by the end of the war. That's if he stays alive, of course." "I'll survive," Dan told them. "I have plans." "Really?" Both men leant forward eagerly. "And what might they be?" George asked. "None of your business." "Not a brigadier, George. It'll be a general." "Without a doubt." "Oh, you two have really cheered me up," Stan told them, laughing. "Grace is safe, and that could mean Bill will turn up soon as well. Take us somewhere we can get a bottle of champagne, General. I feel like celebrating." Laughter filled the car, and when Dan glanced at the driver, he saw he was having terrible trouble not to roar with laughter. He sat back and smiled. It had been a good morning, and he could ship out with an easy mind. Chapter 25. There were 5 officers sitting behind a large table when Grace took her seat. 3 she didn't know, but was relieved to see Stan and one of her instructors from the training centre. Both of them smiled encouragingly at her, but the others were serious and watching her intently. She lifted her chin just a little higher, determined not to show how hard this was going to be for her. "Welcome back," the one chairing the debriefing said. "I'm Brigadier Nelson." He introduced everyone else, but Grace didn't take in the names. "We want you to give a full and detailed account of everything that happened on this mission." Grace drew in a silent breath. The fact that she was here and Bill wasn't was tearing her apart. She'd left him behind, and that was something she couldn't forgive herself for. "When you're ready." "Sorry, sir. I was just sorting out my thoughts." There was only one place to start, and that was from the moment they'd landed in France. Grace began to speak, her voice firm and clear. It took almost an hour to relate all that had happened, and when she'd finished she looked at the officers. Now the questions would come. "We'll take a break here for refreshments." "Thank you, sir. May I leave the room for a moment?" He inclined his head. 10 minutes. Grace hurried to the ladies' room, relieved to find it empty. That had taken more out of her than she thought it would. She splashed cold water on her face, took several deep breaths, and only when she felt in full control again did she make her way back to the debriefing. They were talking among themselves when she returned, but stopped as soon as she entered the room. She was given a welcome cup of tea and sipped it, longing for this ordeal to be over. "Do you know what the chateau was being used for, and what the explosion destroyed?" "No, sir. I never saw Captain Reed again." "So you left without knowing what had happened to him," one of the other officers said. His remark hurt, but Grace tried not to let it show. "I was following orders, sir. I was told to avoid capture because if Captain Reed was caught they could use me to make him talk." "Even so. You left before finding out what had happened to him or what the chateau was being used for." Grace bristled at the man's tone. "I was following orders. With the area swarming with German troops searching for you, it would be dangerous to disobey orders. Not only for Captain Reed and myself, but for the many others who were helping us. I don't suppose you've ever been in that situation, sir. So I realise it's hard to understand." There was silence, but Grace didn't lower her gaze. They could do what they liked with her. She didn't care. After what she'd gone through, no one was going to intimidate her. "Quite right." Stan glared at the offending officer. "Captain Reed is an experienced operator and would know exactly what had to be done if things went wrong. It would have been imperative that his companion was safe. With only himself to worry about, he will have had more chance of surviving." "I agree," the chairman said firmly. "Let's move on. You said you came over the Pyrenees. Did you make the journey on your own?"
"No, sir. I had a guide as far as Spain, an Englishman by the name of Harry."
There were puzzled looks the other side of the table as they all turned to the SOE instructor. When he shook his head, the chairman turned to Grace again. "What do you know about him?"
"Nothing. He was waiting at the house when we arrived. Captain Reed knew him, though, and called him Harry. The captain told me that if there was trouble, I was to find Harry, and he would help me."
"And he took you over the mountains?" Grace nodded.
"Once we were over the border, he turned back and told me he was going to find Captain Reed."
Stan let out a pent-up breath. "Did Bill give Harry your codes?"
"I don't know, sir, but he seemed to know him well, so he might have done. The Germans had found our wireless set, though, so we couldn't send any messages. When we went to the chateau, I don't believe Captain Reed expected to come out again."
Grace struggled to keep her emotions out of her voice.
"He was insistent that I left the chateau if he wasn't back by 12.
"A sensible decision." The chairman gave Grace an understanding smile. "And I suspect that was not an easy order to obey."
"No, sir. I wanted to stay, but I trusted Captain Reed. He'd told me it was imperative that I got away."
She sat up a little straighter, longing for this to end.
"I followed his orders and did just that."
"How did you get to Gibraltar without money?" one of the officers asked.
"Harry gave me what little he had, and when I needed more I worked as a waitress in a cafe until I had enough for the train fare. That's why it took me so long to get home."
The man in charge looked at the others. "I think you will agree that this is a story of determination, resilience, and courage, gentlemen. It is unfortunate that we still do not know what was in the chateau. However, after listening to Lance Corporal Lincoln's account of her escape, we can hope that Captain Reed will also return. We do know, however, that there was something important there, and the captain put his life at risk to destroy it, trusting that his companion would escape. Whoever this Harry was, Captain Reed trusted him enough to ask for help if it was needed. He played a vital role in Lance Corporal Lincoln's escape, and he deserves our gratitude." When they all nodded agreement, he turned back to Grace. "Thank you. You have behaved in an exemplary manner, and I am sure you're now ready for some leave. Welcome home, and well done."
"Thank you, sirs."
Grace stood up, saluted smartly and marched out of the room. Once outside, her legs threatened to give way and she held onto a small hall table for support. Her mind was numb. The sea crossing had been rough, and the moment she'd arrived they'd whisked her to the debriefing, giving her no chance to rest before the grilling. She was so tired. "Grace," Stan gripped her arms to hold her up. "Let's get you home."
"No."
She shook her head.
"Take me to my digs in Aldershot, please. I'd like to rest before travelling home."
"I understand. My car is outside."
"Can we get a cup of tea and a sandwich first? I haven't had much to eat."
"Of course. They've got a canteen here."
He watched as she straightened up, and then walked beside her to the canteen. He didn't help her because he knew she would have hated that.
This girl was going to stand on her own 2 feet, no matter what she'd been through.
After watching her in that room, his admiration had grown, and he now understood what George and Dan recognised in her. Bill also saw it. Courage. Bloody courage. While they were in the canteen, the SOE instructor came over. When Grace went to stand up, he made her sit down again. "I'm glad you're still here. You were a good student and I felt sure you would do well. You have proved my instinct correct. I'm very proud of you." Grace grimaced. "I'm not proud of myself. I left Bill behind." "That is exactly what you had to do. You played your part and got Bill into the chateau. You couldn't help him after that, and you did what he needed you to do, and that was to get out of there alive. Don't reproach yourself, Grace." "Thank you, sir. But it's hard." "I know, but these are dangerous times. In years to come, we'll look back and only then recognise the sacrifices made by individuals. I know Bill well, and if there's any way of getting out alive, he will have found it. You relax and rest now." As the instructor walked away, Stan scowled. "I didn't like the glint in his eyes when he was talking to you. I have a nasty feeling we haven't seen the last of him." Grace didn't bother to comment. She was too weary to work out what he meant. "Ready?" he asked, when he saw her plate was empty. "Or would you like another sandwich?" She shook her head, stood up and walked with him to the waiting car. She settled in the back and closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the hum of the tyres on the road. It was strangely comforting. "Sleep if you want to," Stan told her softly. "You must be worn out after your journey and debriefing. They might have given you a day to recover." They were anxious to see if I had any information about the chateau. "If you have further questions about Bill, could you leave it for a short time, sir? I've done all the talking I want to for a while." "You told me everything you knew at the debriefing, so relax now." They were soon back at Aldershot, and when Stan went to help her out of the car, she smiled. "I'm all right, sir." "Just trying to be a gentleman," he joked. "You're officially on leave now, so go home as soon as you feel rested enough. Take as much time as you need." "Thank you, sir." She saluted and walked into the house. "Potter," Stan called as he strode into the office. "Tell the medics I need a female nurse here at once." "Are you ill, sir?" "Not for me. Why are you still standing there? Don't come back without one." Potter turned and ran from the office. Stan paced the room. Grace said she was all right. He wasn't too sure about that. After the debriefing, she'd given a clear, unemotional account of the mission without a hint of how she was feeling. Her journey to Gibraltar had been skirted over as if it was unimportant. But he'd seen that brief crack in her composure when the debriefing had finished. Any fool could see that her escape from France had been tough. She'd had a guide over the Pyrenees. But once over the border, Harry had left her to make her own way across Spain. And who the hell was Harry? Was he the one who had sent that message? "Damn it, Bill. Was the mission a success or a failure? If you don't come back, this is going to haunt us forever." "Sir?" Stan spun round to face the military nurse standing in his office. He'd been so lost in thought he hadn't heard anyone come in. "Ah, thank you for coming so quickly. Lance Corporal Lincoln has just returned from a hazardous mission and is exhausted. She was checked by a doctor on her return and is physically fit, but I would like you to keep an eye on her for a few hours. Let her sleep, but when she wakes, make sure she has something to eat and drink." "I understand, sir. If she's in a communal billet, it might be wise to move her to the hospital." "She's in a room of her own." Stan handed the nurse the address, a slight smile on his face. "When she sees you, she will tell you to leave, saying she doesn't need you. Ignore her. You're there on my orders, and she can take it out on me later." "Sounds like she has a strong character." "I doubt she would be alive today if she didn't possess a strong, determined character." "Anything else I should know, sir?" "No, that's it. Oh, her name is Grace, by the way." The nurse was just leaving when George arrived. "Is Grace all right, Stan? Just exhausted. The nurse is a precaution.
I want someone around should she need them. Very thoughtful of you. How did the debriefing go? You looked done in. Sit down and have a drink with me, and I'll tell you all about it. It's quite an amazing story. Chapter 26. The next morning, when Stan walked into the office, he stopped in astonishment. Grace was at her desk, going through the post. "What the devil are you doing here?"
"I work here, sir."
"Don't you be cheeky with me, Sergeant."
"It's Lance Corporal, sir."
"I've just promoted you. Where's Potter?"
"He's gone to get some fresh milk and more supplies." "Why have you promoted me?"
"Because you deserve it. A thank you, sir, would be nice."
"Thank you, sir."
"Did you always speak your mind with your lawyer, boss?"
"He encouraged me to do so."
"Then he has a lot to answer for." Stan began to laugh. "Ha ha, but I've missed you. Nevertheless, you shouldn't be here. You're officially on leave. Potter has another week before returning to his unit. Go home. Your parents are anxious to see you."
"I know they are, but I would rather stay here for a while."
Stan sat beside her. "I know you're worried about Bill, but the moment there's any news I will come and tell you. You have my word on that, so go home. See your family, and go out with your friends. Learn to laugh again. Whatever the outcome of this mission, you did everything you were asked to do. We're all proud of you, and Bill will be too when he finds out what you endured to escape. I know you feel you shouldn't have left him behind, but that was exactly what you had to do. And Bill wouldn't have been pleased if you'd stayed around trying to help him. You would have put both of your lives in danger by doing that."
"So I keep being told. But it doesn't help. He gave me strict instructions, though, and he'd also asked Harry to get me out if things went wrong. I did as ordered, but reluctantly. When I finally reached Gibraltar, I should have been elated, but I wasn't. I was safe, but Bill and Harry were still in danger. It's hard to dismiss that."
"I wonder who this Harry is." Grace shook her head.
"I really don't know. But if it hadn't been for him, I might still be there trying to avoid capture."
"I hope I can shake his hand one day and thank him. You said he went back to find Bill. Do you think he can?"
"If anyone can find him, then Harry will."
"That's comforting to know." Stan stood up. "Now, get out of here, Sergeant, and that's an order. By the way, what did you do with the nurse?"
"I sent her back to the hospital, sir."
He looked up at the ceiling. "I don't know why I bother."
"It was a kind thought, but I didn't need her." The door opened, and George strode in, smiling with pleasure when he saw Grace.
"Welcome home, my dear. But what are you doing here? Has he got you working again already?" "Don't blame me. She won't damn well go on leave. You tell her, George. She might obey you. I'm wasting my breath."
"All right." Grace stood up, hands raised in surrender. "I'm going."
George looked at his watch. "I've got a couple of hours free. Get your bag and I'll take you home."
"It's already packed, and it won't take me long to collect it." She reached the door and looked back at Stan. "You promise?"
"You have my word."
She nodded, went out, and closed the door softly behind her.
"What was that all about?" George asked, frowning. "I think she wanted to stay here in case there's any word about Bill. She isn't going to be able to relax until she knows what's happened to him. It's important she gets away from here, though." "I agree. I fear the war has a long way to go yet, and that girl has already had her share of heartaches. Sitting on the sidelines is hard, Stan. I applied to return to active duty, but all I've done is swap one desk for another. I guess Dan was right when he hinted that we were too old. Maybe, but there are many twists and turns to come. And we could get our chance, or you could. You're younger than me and have had battle experience. Have you heard from Dan yet, by the way?" "No, he might still be at sea." Stan nodded. Thanks for taking Grace home. There's another reason I want her out of the way for a while. I think the SOE could be after her. That wouldn't surprise me. They're on the lookout for suitable candidates, and they know she would be right for the job after this mission. What will you do? I would like to tell them they can't have her, but it would have to be Grace's decision. I'll try to keep them away from her until she's come to terms with what has happened. This is no time for her to be making hasty decisions. Don't forget to point out that she's a valuable member of your intelligence team, and would be hard to replace. Absolutely, and when Bill gets back, he might need her help again. If they want her, they'll have to approach you first, so tell them all that before she makes a commitment. Keep me informed, Stan. Will do. Grace arrived back then and stood in the doorway. Already? I don't want to see you for at least 10 days, Stan told her sternly. Right, sir. She walked with George to the car he had ordered and climbed in the back. Thanks for the lift. Will you come in when we get home? Just for a few minutes. You don't have to worry, Grace. Your parents are understanding people, and they know they mustn't ask any questions. They love you, and are just happy to have you home again for a while. When Brian died, I didn't want to talk about it, and this is the same feeling. That debriefing drained me. Now you need to rest, and the best place to do that is at home. She nodded and changed the subject. How is Dan? All right, as far as I know. He's on a ship somewhere. My guess is he's heading for North Africa. Oh, he'll be happy to be on the move at last. I expect so. George sighed. Dangerous place, though, with Rommel in charge of the Germans. I know he has a fearsome reputation, but he isn't invincible. Neither is Hitler. It's going to be a long, hard struggle, but we have to win. There isn't any other alternative, and we will all do whatever is necessary to bring about their downfall. George looked at her and smiled. I agree with every word of that. But enough of the war. You're home safely and on leave. Take the time to clear your mind. Try not to dwell on the past or the future. The past is gone, and we can't change it, and the future is yet to come. All we can have is this moment, so live it, Grace. She gave a little laugh. You sound just like my mother. She's a wise woman. For 10 days, Grace slept, went to the cinema, read several books, and did all the normal things. She didn't talk about her experiences, and her parents never asked. It would have helped if Helen had been home as well, but her family said she hadn't been on leave for some time. James and Tim were evidently away somewhere, so she spent the time with her parents or on her own. But this time she didn't mind. It was just the kind of quiet time she needed. Every day she'd hoped that Stan would come with news. But he never did. The time at home had been a chance to get back to something like normal life, where she didn't have to keep hiding for fear of being caught. But she was pleased to be back at Aldershot. At home, there had been too much time to think, and she needed work to keep her occupied. Potter had left everything neat and tidy for her, and a folder full of reports to bring her up to date. Stan marched in, looking preoccupied as usual. "Good morning, sir." "Is it?" he muttered, not breaking his stride. At the door of his office he stopped and turned his head. "Good Lord, have 10 days gone already?" "They have." "Ah, you look better. Did you enjoy your leave?" "I did. Thank you, sir." He nodded. "Make a strong pot of tea and bring it to my office. We have work to catch up on." He was right, and it took them a week to deal with everything. Grace was finishing off the last report when the office door opened and the words, "Can I help you?" died on her lips. Standing there, grinning, was the man she had never expected to see again. "Bill!" Overcome with joy, she threw herself at him, laughing as he gave her a bear hug. Don't I get one of those as well? Asked a familiar voice.
Harry! Oh, this is wonderful! Grace wasn't normally a demonstrative person, but this was too much for her, and she cried out with pleasure as she rushed to greet him.
What the devil's going on here? Stan boomed, standing in the doorway. Where the hell have you been? That's a pretty good description of the last few weeks, wouldn't you say, Harry? Close enough. Stan couldn't hide his relief at seeing Bill again and slapped him on the back before approaching the other man and shaking his hand. So you're the mysterious Harry. I suspect we have a lot to thank you for. We really thought we'd lost these two. Grace, no more work today. We're going to celebrate. Come into my office. I've got a bottle of whiskey I've been saving for a special occasion.
Stan only had 2 glasses, so they used cups, but no one cared. They were all too happy.
When did you arrive back? Stan asked, when they were settled. About 2 hours ago. We hitched a lift on a plane from Switzerland.
How on earth did you get there, Bill? Grace asked.
With difficulty, Harry said dryly. But why come that way? Stan wanted to know. You were closer to Spain, surely. We tried that, but after the damage I'd caused, they were determined to catch me and brought in extra troops. Harry managed to get you to Spain before the area was flooded with more troops and tracker dogs, Grace. It was too risky to go that way, so we had to head for Switzerland. Harry had to come with me because he'd borrowed a homemade wireless set and tried to send a message. The SS nearly caught him. He managed to get away, but not before they'd seen him. He had to disappear after that. That answers the puzzle of the strange message we picked up. What was in the chateau, Bill? I found a huge, well-camouflaged building in the grounds. It was a communication centre, full of the finest equipment I've ever seen. And the men in there were very busy. There's no telling what information they were gathering. I couldn't leave that, so I found an armament store and made a bomb. It went up beautifully and should put them out of action for some time.
How did you get out of there? Grace wanted to know.
I couldn't, but fortunately the grounds were huge and I was able to dodge the search parties for several days. I survived on grapes, berries and anything else I could find. Once the frantic activity had quietened down, I stole an ordinary German uniform from the sleeping quarters and jumped on a lorry, leaving the chateau. That's how I found him, Harry continued. I guessed he must still be in there and was searching for a way in, when I saw a soldier jump off a lorry and dive into the undergrowth by the road. I crept up on him, and there was Bill, sitting in a ditch. Bill grinned. That's the second time he nearly shot me. I don't think Harry likes Germans. Of course I don't. They invaded my country. Your country? Stan frowned. But you're English, aren't you? I was educated at Cambridge University. But I'm French. Free French. Grace stared at him, absolutely stunned.
I'd never have guessed it. Your accent is perfect. I have a friend who is working as an interpreter for the Free French. Helen. You might have met her.
Not that I recall. And if she's as beautiful as you, I would certainly have remembered. Grace laughed.
You didn't pay me compliments like that when I arrived back at the farm, scratched and filthy.
I was so relieved to see you, I thought you were the most beautiful girl ever. Stop flirting with Grace, Bill reprimanded. You'll have to stand at the back of a long line.
There he goes again. Grace shook her head. He's only just arrived back, and he's talking nonsense already.
And now you're back, you'll have to attend a debriefing. Not me, Harry told them. And standing up. I have my own outfit to report to. I'll need your name for my records, Stan said. Harry bent and kissed Grace's cheek. See you again sometime, lovely one. And Bill, try not to get into trouble again. Oh, and my name is Harry. Just Harry. Wiping the sweat from his eyes, Dan paused and looked around. How many of his men had he lost in that battle? He'd begun with an enormous gun barrage that had lit up the night sky and shattered the silence of the desert. What had followed had been 12 days of fierce fighting. They had finally won the Battle of El Alamein, and Rommel was in full retreat. Dan spotted a few of his men slumped down on the ground and leaning against a wall. When he approached, they began to stand up. "Stay where you are," he said, sitting down beside them. The sergeant among them grinned. "We've got Rommel on the run this time. He'll have a job to come back from this beating." "They're badly weakened, and we should now be able to push them out of Africa." Dan studied the men all around, looking for any he could recognise. It wasn't easy, though, because they were all dirty and dishevelled. "Have you any idea how many of ours have survived, Sergeant?" "We haven't done a tally yet, sir. Would you like us to do that now?" "No. Get yourself sorted out first. When you've cleaned up and had something to eat, come and find me. We'll do it together." "Right you are, sir." Dan hoisted himself up and strode towards the hastily set-up operations section. The loss of even one man was too many in Dan's opinion, and he feared that battle had been costly. But a huge success. He would need to keep reminding himself of that. They had taken a battering at home with Dunkirk, the desperate fight in the air, and the Blitz. The victory was badly needed, and now they had one. The once considered invincible had been shown to be vulnerable, and that should give a spark of hope to everyone. "It's such a long time since we've heard that sound." Grace smiled up at George as they stood outside listening to the church bells ringing. To mark the victory at El Alamein, Churchill had ordered all church bells to be rung. They had been silent since the outbreak of war. Bill joined them. "Dan's out there, isn't he, George? Have you heard from him yet?" "I expect he's been in the thick of the fighting. It'll be a while before we hear from him. He's not much of a letter writer anyway." Stan came out of the office just as the last peals faded away. "Clever idea to ring the bells. That gives everyone a taste of victory, making them even more determined to finish the war off." "It'll be back to Europe next," Bill remarked. "There's a lot to be done before that," George pointed out. "When we go in there again, there will be no turning back. There cannot be another Dunkirk, so everything must be carefully planned. I would say there's no chance of launching an invasion for at least a year." Chapter 27. When Grace looked back, she couldn't believe 18 months had passed since she'd returned from France. Preparations for the invasion were well underway, and the country was crowded with troops and equipment, and more were still pouring in. Camps were springing up everywhere. Tanks were hidden in trees, and ships waiting in the harbours around the coast. Efforts were being made to camouflage as much as possible, but it was a huge task. An even greater concern was how to keep all this activity a secret, especially the location of the proposed landings. A great deal of work and thought had been put into the need to trick Hitler into believing the invasion would be in a different place to the one planned. Stan and Grace were returning from an intelligence meeting when they were waved off the road. They got out of the car and watched as a convoy of lorries came past, carrying newly arrived American troops. When they saw Grace, they began to whistle and shout out to her. Laughing, she came smartly to attention and saluted them. This caused even more hilarity. The convoy seemed never-ending, and following them were tanks. "My God," Stan murmured. "There isn't room on this small island for any more, surely. It's going to need a miracle to keep this build-up a secret. If Hitler doesn't already know, then he must be asleep." "Let's hope he is. We've had a few miracles in this war so far, like plucking the army off the beaches at Dunkirk, beating the Luftwaffe in the air, surviving the Blitz, and not forgetting El Alamein and the seamen in the Atlantic. We'd have starved without their bravery." Stan looked down at Grace and smiled. "All true. But you forgot one. The miracle of getting you and Bill back from France." She shrugged. "I would say that was luck on my part, and Bill's skill at undercover work. Will he be going over with the troops?" "He's going in with the second wave, where he can be of the most use. Dan's back from North Africa, and will be going in first, as usual. He's a colonel now. Stan grinned. George is trying hard to be included, and he'll probably succeed. He's younger than me and has battle experience. James and Tim arrived home last month, after serving in Malta for a while. They'll be needed. It looks as if the two of us will be the only ones left behind. We'll have our part to play, though. Have you seen your friend Helen lately? Not for nearly 2 years. It's worrying, but if anything had happened to her, we would have been told. That's true. The road is clear at last. When they arrived back at Aldershot, George marched into the office, all smiles. Come to let you know I'm leaving here today. Where are you going? Grace asked. Now you know I can't answer that, Grace. Of course not. Silly question. You've got your wish then, George. Yes, I got thrown out of Dunkirk and I want to go back. You two take care of yourselves while I'm away. And you be careful. I will, Grace. He kissed her cheek, shook hands with Stan and left. We are going to have a lot of people to worry about, aren't we? I'm afraid so. Before you start typing up the report of today's meeting, put the kettle on, Grace. I'm gasping for a cup of tea. I expect you're finding the weather a bit different from North Africa, Bill said to the tall man standing beside him. Dan nodded and gazed up at the dark leaden sky, feeling the rain on his face. Wish it were clear enough for us to get going. I hate hanging around like this. It's unsettling for the men to be sitting on the ships for so long, not knowing if we're going tonight or not. The harbour was filled with men and ships, as were many others along the coast. Bill sighed. Just look at that. The Germans must know we're coming. Assembling such an enormous invasion fleet can't have gone unnoticed, surely. This country's groaning under the weight of troops and armaments. They know we're coming, but let's hope they've believed all the misinformation you've been feeding them, so they don't know where or when. Surprise is the key to success for this operation. Well, they won't be expecting us in this kind of weather, though it doesn't seem quite as bad. Suddenly, there was activity everywhere, and a soldier ran up to Dan. H hour now, Major Chester. Dan was immediately moving. See you in Berlin, Bill. I'll be there. Longlegs took Dan with speed to the ship, glad all the waiting was over. He was going back at last, and they damn well wouldn't drive him out again. This time, they would be staying. Retreat was out of the question. Bill stayed where he was and watched the huge armada making its way out of Southampton, and knew the same was happening at Dartmouth, Portland, Portsmouth and Shoreham. He would be going with one of the follow-up forces. He knew Germany was now a very different country to the one he and Dan remembered, and he hoped they both survived to meet up and see for themselves. It would be painful and sad, no doubt, but Hitler and his regime had to be defeated. It was nearly dawn, but Stan and Grace were still in the office waiting for news. When the phone rang, Stan snatched it up eagerly, and Grace waited, hardly able to breathe with the tension they were feeling. It's underway, he said, replacing the phone and looking at the calendar. June the 6th. You might as well get some sleep now. There's nothing else for us to do, and there won't be any news for a few hours. I don't think sleep will be possible. What are you going to do, sir? Rest for a couple of hours and then go to the ops room and wait for the reports to start coming in. Can I come with you? Admittance is restricted or the place would be full to bursting. I'll write you up for 7 days' leave. Grace knew it was useless to refuse. She wouldn't be needed for a while. All she could do was wait, and she might as well do that at home with her parents. They would be excited, but she knew too many men involved in this invasion to be able to relax. She had seen a little of what conditions were like in France, and could picture the opposition the troops would probably face. Stan was already writing out the leave authorization, and when he handed it to her, he smiled. By the time you return, we will have a clearer picture of the situation. Go home and try to relax. The build-up to the invasion has been a trying time.
Thank you, sir.
There wasn't any need to rush home because Grace knew both of her parents would be out, so she hung around for a while and arrived home near 6 o'clock that evening. She was pleased to find her mother at home. It was nice to be greeted instead of walking into an empty house.
How wonderful,
Jean exclaimed, giving her daughter a hug.
How long have you got?
7 days.
Is Dad at work?
Jean nodded.
He won't be home until later. We've just heard the exciting news that the invasion's underway. Let's have a nice cup of tea before you unpack your bag. I do miss our little chats.
Grace laughed, feeling some of the tension of the last few days easing away.
You look tired, darling,
her mother remarked as she poured the tea.
We've been busy and haven't had much sleep. I'll catch up on it while I'm at home.
I expect you've known about the invasion for some time.
Yes. The bad weather held it up, which was worrying for everyone, but they were finally able to go ahead.
Jean sighed.
Everyone is naturally very excited, and he's saying that the war could be over by Christmas. I hope they're right, but I can't help thinking about all those young men. You probably have a better idea than most of us. So do you think it could be over that quickly?
It's too soon to say, Mum. I don't think it's going to be that easy, though.
No, you're right. But we can hope for a speedy victory. Tell me what you've been up to. The last time you were on leave, you were worried about someone you'd been working with. Is he all right now?
Grace raised her eyebrows.
Don't look at me like that, Grace. I know you weren't allowed to tell us anything, but I'm not daft. One night you were restless, and I sat by your bed for a while. You cried out the name Bill. You were very distressed. You didn't tell me? No, darling. I haven't mentioned it to anyone, not even your father. Whatever it was, you needed to come to terms with it yourself, and I knew you would.
Can you talk about it now?
The only thing I can tell you is that Bill is all right.
Good. You were very worried about him.
What's he like? Tall, good-looking, late 20s, I would say.
Grace smiled.
When I first met him, I thought he was flippant, always joking and never taking anything seriously. But I was wrong. That's the face he presents to the world. And I saw a very different man when we worked together. He's intelligent, efficient, and a very brave man.
You sound as if you think a lot of him.
I do.
Jean studied her daughter carefully.
Perhaps we could meet him sometime. Maybe, but it won't be for a while. I take it that means he's involved in the invasion. Mum, everyone I know's taking part. James, Tim, Dan, and even George.
George? Jean exclaimed. I didn't expect him to go.
He's an experienced officer, and he wanted to go.
Jean nodded and changed the subject abruptly.
Do you know where Helen is?
No. I thought you might have some idea as you work in intelligence and must see a lot of secret information.
I do, but I don't know anything about Helen's work. All she's told me is that she's working as an interpreter for the Free French. I'm sorry, I can't tell you anything more than that.
I shouldn't have asked. Jean squeezed her daughter's hand. Why don't you go and unpack while I get dinner ready? Over the next week, they listened avidly to the news reports of the invasion. The troops were beginning to move inland, much to everyone's relief. As Grace read the newspapers and tuned into the wireless every day, she knew the reports could not convey the real struggle each individual was experiencing. How were all those she cared about? Were they injured? Were they alive? What about the people at the farm who had risked their lives for her? Would they be all right? To have armies fighting desperately over your land must be terrible. Was Harry there? Of course he was. He would probably have been in the first wave. All those people were at the forefront of her thoughts, and one other she was dreadfully worried about.
Where are you, Helen? Are you still in France? If you are, please stay safe.
There were only 2 days of her leave left when James came to see her. The moment she set eyes on him, she knew something was wrong. He looked drawn and ill. She took him into the kitchen and put the kettle on to make tea. He sat down with a weary sigh. I'm glad you're home, Grace, are your parents here?
They're both at work. Are you on leave?
Yes. And I've got bad news. Tim was killed 2 days ago. I saw him go down, and he didn't stand a chance. Sadness swept over her. He'd been such a lovely boy and so full of life. James must be devastated to have seen his friend killed like that.
I'm so sorry, James. What a tragedy.
He nodded and gulped down his tea. To have survived all the battles we've been in and then to be killed when the war could be entering its final stages is hard to take. Could you break the news to Helen for me, Grace?
Of course. Would you like to stay here tonight? I've still got 2 days' leave left.
That's kind of you, but I'm on my way to see Tim's family. He stood up and hugged her. Wish I could stay, but I can't.
I understand.
She stood at the door and watched him walk down the street. His head was high and stride confident as always. Anyone passing him wouldn't know the pain he was feeling at this moment. He'd seen many of his colleagues die, but he had been particularly close to Tim. She wondered if the scars they were all suffering would ever heal. When she thought about Brian, she knew they would never completely go away, but she had to learn to live with them. Closing the door, she wiped a tear from her eyes, very aware that this might not be the last time such news arrived. Grace's leave didn't end on a happy note. Not only had she received the sad news of Tim's death, but on the last day London had a new threat to face. On the 13th of June, Hitler began sending over unmanned flying bombs, and once again, people had to endure the danger and destruction these noisy and unpredictable weapons were causing. Chapter 28. Sir, there's a young girl here asking to see an officer. Says she's English and has some important news. Dan looked up from the map he was studying and frowned. Did you check her papers? Yes, sir, but they're French. If she is English, then they must be false. She sounds English, though. That doesn't mean much. I can sound German if I need to. Bring her in, and let's see what this is about. Keep a guard on her. Dan folded the map and put it away, including any other papers he had spread about. No point taking chances in case she wasn't who she said she was. The girl who entered was of average height, with dark brown hair and eyes. She certainly didn't look English. What can I do for you?
It's what I can do for you that's important, Colonel. I've come to tell you that there's a trap waiting for your regiment a mile down the road.
We've scouted that area and found nothing.
2 machine gun posts have been concealed in the hillside. They were set up during the night, and when you advance, they'll be looking right down at you. It'll be a massacre, Colonel.
She pulled a tattered map out of her pocket and spread it out on the makeshift table.
This is where you are, and the guns are here. Not only are they well hidden, but they're hard to get to. We know because we tried to get a close look at dawn.
We? Are you with the Resistance?
The men I'm with are. There's no harm in telling you now. I'm an SOE. If you could give us enough explosives, we can try to knock them out before you move forward.
It was a plausible story, but Dan was still cautious. You can't expect me to give strangers explosives, surely. I will need to meet the rest of your group before taking any action. She nodded and put the map back in her pocket.
I would have thought less of you if you hadn't shown caution. We have also learnt that lesson, Colonel. I'll take you to them, but you can only bring 1 soldier with you.
It could be a trap, but then again she could be telling the truth. If that was the case, he had to take the chance. He nodded to the sergeant standing by the entrance of the wrecked building they were using. He acknowledged the silent command with a nod. Very well. Take us to them. Waiting in a small copse a short way from the camp were 3 men. Dan studied them carefully. They were all armed, but showed no sign of aggression. Ah, you found a colonel. Well done, Helen. One man said in perfect English and held out his hand to Dan. I'm Harry, sir. Free French. And you are? Chester. Dan shook his hand and then his gaze fixed on the girl. She was also staring back at him. Your name is Helen? She looked him up and down and her smile widened.
Ah, yes. You fit the description of Major Daniel Chester, formerly of the War Office while recovering from an injury. He'd never seen this girl before, and there was only one way she could know that about him. Are you Grace Lincoln's friend? I am. She held out her hand. I'm pleased to meet you at last. Grace enjoyed working for you, and you helped her through a difficult time. We helped each other. He shook her hand and relaxed. They were genuine, and that meant the information was as well. Thank you for coming to us. If you would all come back to the camp with me, we can work out what to do about this problem. The unusual sight of their colonel walking with a girl and 3 civilian men, all armed, caused a buzz of interest when they returned to the camp. Dan headed straight for the damaged farmhouse they were using as a base and turned to his sergeant. Find Captain Bolton and Lieutenant Harris and ask them to come here at once. See if you can rustle up refreshments as well. Yes, sir. The officers appeared almost immediately, along with mugs of tea and a pile of sandwiches, quickly prepared by their cook. Helen and the men tucked in enthusiastically, not caring what the sandwiches contained. When did you last eat? Dan wanted to know. Harry shrugged and grinned, taking another sandwich. Can't remember. You told me you were Free French, but you sound English and are not in uniform. Did you get separated from your unit? I work alone, Colonel, and go where I'm needed. The uniform is a hindrance when I want to blend into the background. I carry it with me, though, and I sound English because I was educated there. Ah, that explains it. I was educated in Germany. So I've heard. Dan gave him a speculative look. And how do you know so much about me? Someone must have told me. Harry grinned and took another sandwich from the rapidly depleting pile. That was all Harry was going to say, and Dan knew it would be useless to ask more questions. Let's get down to work. They spent the next hour exploring ways of knocking out the gun emplacements. Then Dan ran a hand through his hair and shook his head. Whatever we do is going to be risky and damn difficult. They've chosen a good spot by the look of it. Wish Bill was with us. He'd deal with them in no time at all. I've never met a man so skilled at blowing up things. Do you have any idea where he is? Dan asked. He sounds just like the man for the job. I haven't the faintest idea. That man can't be found unless he wants to be. Who is he? Dan was intrigued. Captain William Reed masquerades as British intelligence. But he's really a spy, like Harry. Helen laughed softly at Dan's astonished expression. Ah, I see you know him. We've met, but I'm having a hell of a job believing this. France is a big country, and the chances of our meeting like this must be astronomical. True, but here we are, and here you are stuck unless we can disable those guns. If you try to go another way, it'll mean leaving that trap for someone else to fall into. Harry rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Whatever the risks are, we have got to deal with this. We'll need plenty of explosives. It's the only way, Colonel. I agree. I'll get a team together and go with them. The room erupted with protest. Sir, the lieutenant stepped forward. With the brigadier dead, you're our highest-ranking officer. We're trapped here unless we can move forward and meet up with the other regiments. The men trust your leadership, sir. You're needed here. The 2 resistance men, who had remained silent until now, shook their heads. You give us the explosives, and we will do this. It is for us to put those guns out of action. We find them. We destroy them. Leave it to us, Daniel. The men are experienced and have more chance of getting up that hill unnoticed. I can't let you go alone. This is our fight as well. What about a compromise? Harry suggested. Let us have 2 of your best demolition men. Not you, though. Your men are right. Your place is here. Very well. I agree, but reluctantly. Dan heard the officers breathe an audible sigh of relief and could understand their concerns. Their situation was not good, and it was imperative that they meet up with the others. The last thing any of them wanted was to find themselves surrounded and captured. He hated to stand on the sidelines, though, especially in a dangerous situation like this. But for the time being, he was in command, and had no choice in the matter. Sergeant, find Adams and Walker. Harry, you go with him and explain the problem to them. Take their advice. They're experts. And then come back here. When the men left, Dan turned to Helen. Would you like more sandwiches? No, thank you. She gave a grim smile. It looks as if you have had a tough time getting this far. Dan nodded. And if you hadn't come to us, we could have been cut down before getting any further. Somehow we have to fight our way out of this because I won't be captured again. He growled. We will be moving after midnight, no matter what the situation. We have to. We'll do what we can to help. You have probably already saved our lives by alerting us to the guns. End of CD 8. CD 9. The men returned, and Dan ran through the task with his men to make sure they fully understood what had to be done. Have you got everything you need? He asked. Yes, sir. If we can get close enough without being seen, we'll deal with those guns. The light is just beginning to fade, so good luck to all of you. Dan's men saluted, and then hauled packs onto their backs before filing out. Helen, can you stay here? Dan said, when she headed after the men. She turned her head. I go with them. You don't have to risk your life as well. Daniel, I have risked my life every day for more than 2 years. I am an excellent shot with good night vision. I can give them cover while they're working. I'll see you later. She waved before disappearing. That's a brave girl, the captain remarked. Hope they succeed. If they don't, then we will have to try again because we will be moving out soon. We can't stay here much longer. Tell the men to be ready. If the way is cleared, we'll move out at once. Yes, sir. Both officers saluted and hurried out, leaving Dan and the sergeant alone. Dan sat on a wooden box and rested his head against the wall. Waiting was always hard. If the brigadier had still been alive, he could have gone with them. Instead, he had to delegate and let others take risks. Why don't you snatch some sleep, sir? The sergeant told him. I'll wake you if you're needed. I won't be able to sleep until we're safely out of this place. You can, if you want to. The sergeant shook his head. Let's take a walk round then and see how preparations are going for the move. Dan hauled himself to his feet. They spent the next hour touring the camp and talking to the men. They were naturally curious and concerned about the situation, so Dan gathered them together and explained fully what was happening. All of a sudden there was a loud explosion, followed by another and another. The men were all on their feet, staring at the flames leaping into the air as trees caught fire on the hill. Looks like they did it, sir, one of the men shouted. Lieutenant, Dan yelled. Get ready to move out now while there's confusion on that hill. The men moved with such speed that they were on their way in only 5 minutes and making their way towards the blaze. They moved in complete silence in case there was trouble lurking ahead of them. They'd gone some way when Dan saw movement in a clump of bushes beside the road. He lifted his hands and everyone stopped quickly and formed a defensive position. The breath hissed out of him in relief when he saw Adams and Walker step out grinning. They were followed by Helen, Harry, and the 2 resistance men. They all appeared to be in good spirits and unhurt, which took a weight off Dan's shoulders. We've dealt with the guns, sir, and as many of the Germans as we could. But we think there are still few hiding up there. They might cause a bit of trouble, but we should be able to deal with them all right. Well done. Dan shook hands with the Frenchmen and thanked them. Then he smiled at Helen and Harry. You've probably saved a lot of lives, and we are grateful. What are you going to do now? Stay with you until you meet up with the others. We'll scout ahead so you won't know we're there unless we spot trouble. Then we'll alert you. Dan nodded. We're in your debt. Helen gave a quiet laugh. You shouldn't say things like that, Daniel. We might want to collect one day. Anything, any time, he replied. Oh, I can see why Grace liked working with you so much. She lifted her hand in a wave and the group melted away. If there were Germans still on the hill, they made no move to attack the troops, and they passed that spot without incident. They made good progress for 3 days, meeting only sporadic resistance. There had been no sign of Helen or her companions as they moved forward, but Dan was sure they were out there. Then, one evening,
Helen and Harry appeared. "There's a large contingent of British troops over the next rise," Harry told Dan. "I'm leaving you now to rejoin my unit. I want to be with them when Paris is liberated. The information I have is that it could happen within the next couple of weeks." "Good luck, Harry." Dan shook his hand. "It's been good to meet you, and thanks for your help." "My pleasure." Harry hugged Helen and spoke quietly in her ear, then turned and strode away. "Where are the others?" Dan wanted to know. "They have returned to their villages." She looked up at Dan. "About that favour." "Name it." "My work here is finished and I need to send a message to get picked up. When we reach your troops, would you persuade them to let me use their wireless set?" "Of course. You'll be glad to get home." Helen nodded and sighed. "I've been lucky to avoid capture for so long, Daniel. Many others have not been so fortunate." Dan studied the slim girl in front of him, noting just how weary she was. "I'll see you get home, Helen." "Thank you." Chapter 29. Paris was liberated on August the 25th, 1944, and that night they had a party in the mess. Grace sat with an untouched drink in front of her and watched the smiling faces as they celebrated. Her thoughts went back to the time she'd worked for James. On occasions like this, she would have been circulating, doing her job of seeing that the party went smoothly. It was a role she'd enjoyed, and she'd felt useful, needed. She'd had an interesting job, a husband she loved, and the future had looked good. All that had been wrenched from her, and so many others. She shook herself mentally. It was useless to dwell on the past. That life was gone, and would never return. Not even when the war was over. "Snap out of it, Grace," she told herself sternly. "This is a night to celebrate, not dwell on what had been. So you're feeling lonely and useless with everyone close to you away. Admit it. You've done all that was asked of you, so damn well finish your drink and join in the celebration." Grace had just taken a sip of her drink and summoned up a smile when a corporal came up to her. "Sergeant Lincoln, Major General Hayden wants you to return to the office immediately." "Thank you, Corporal." Once outside, Grace started to run. What had happened? Stan wouldn't have sent for her tonight unless it was very important. "That was quick," Stan remarked when she rushed into the office. "What's wrong, sir?" she asked, slightly out of breath. "Nothing is wrong," he smiled. "I have to go somewhere and I need you to accompany me. I hope you didn't mind leaving the party." "No, sir." Grace relaxed. He was smiling. "Where are we going?" "You'll see. Do you still keep a bag packed and ready?" She nodded. "Go and collect it then. We're leaving at once." 30 minutes later, they were in the car and heading for London. Stan turned and smiled at her. "I do like a day full of good news for a change." "I'm pleased you've had a good day," she joked. "Can you share some of it with me, sir? My thoughts have been a little gloomy this evening." "You'll have to wait a while longer, Captain." "Sergeant, sir." "You've just been promoted again." He handed her a packet. "Put these on your uniform as soon as possible." Grace was stunned. "What have I done to deserve this again?" "It's for your excellent service, and we need you as an officer." "Why?" "So you can go into places normally off limits to you." Stan gave an amused chuckle. "There are plans, and I've been given my instructions." "What plans?" "Do you ever stop asking questions? I'm not saying anything else. George sends his love, by the way." "You've heard from George? How is he?" "He's fine. So is Bill, Dan, and—" "And?" When he just grinned, Grace sighed. "You're being very irritating today, sir." "Yes, aren't I? Ah, we've arrived." The car stopped, and Grace looked out, unable to believe her eyes. "This is my house. What are we doing here?" "Questions, questions. Take a look at the people coming out of the front door." Everyone was smiling and waving, and then one person stepped to the front, and Grace was scrambling to get out of the car.
Helen! She cried, running to greet the friend she hadn't seen for such a long time. You're home at last! Jean immediately took charge. Come inside, everyone. There's food and drink laid out in the front room. Will you join us, Major General Hayden?
I would love to. And the name's Stan.
Already sitting in the front room was Helen's grandmother, bursting with pride and happiness. Ted handed round glasses of beer.
Sorry we haven't anything stronger, but it'll do to toast Helen's safe return to us.
When this was done, Grace turned to Stan. Thank you, sir. How did you know?
I received a message to say Helen was on her way home. I checked and discovered she'd arrived today.
Thank you again, sir.
It's my pleasure, Captain.
Ted heard that and said,
Captain?
I've been promoted again, Dad.
My word, this is turning out to be a day for celebrations. Listen, everyone. Grace is now a captain.
She accepted the congratulations, laughing. I think there is some devious reason for this promotion, but I haven't found out what it is yet.
Devious? Me?
Stan pretended to be shocked.
The intelligence service never does anything underhand. This remark produced roars of laughter, and Ted asked, Oh, and who convinced Hitler the invasion would be in the Pas-de-Calais instead of Normandy? I haven't the faintest idea, he said, giving Grace a sly wink, and then finishing his beer. Putting down the empty glass, he went round the room and shook hands with everyone to take his leave. I can only let you have 2 days with your friend, he told Grace.
I'm grateful for that, sir.
The party went on until the early hours of the morning, and it wasn't until after lunch that the friends had time to themselves. The morning rain had stopped, and the sun was out, so they decided to catch a bus to Hyde Park. They ambled along in silence for a while, until 2 soldiers saluted Grace as they passed.
You nearly missed that, Helen laughed. They took me by surprise. I'd forgotten I'm an officer now. Nudge me if that looks like it's happening again.
I will, Helen sighed. This is lovely, just strolling along in a beautiful park, with nothing to worry about.
You must be happy to be back.
Helen nodded. I stayed longer than planned, but I'm glad I did. We managed to be of help to the Allies.
Can I ask how you got out? I joined up with some British soldiers and their officer arranged it for me. That was good of him. But then your Daniel is a good man.
Pardon?
Grace stopped walking and stared at her friend. I said Colonel Daniel Chester is a good man.
Grace could hardly believe what she was hearing.
You met Dan out there?
I did, and I probably helped to save his life. Helen laughed at Grace's astonished expression. Aren't you going to thank me?
Oh, be serious, Helen. Tell me what this is all about.
Can't. I've only told you this much because you were out there at one time. I expect it was Daniel who got the message through to Stan.
Well, I'm blowed.
Aren't you going to ask how he is? If you helped to save his life, then I take it he's fine.
He is.
Helen sighed dramatically. Such a dynamic man. Grace found an empty seat and sat down, patting the seat beside her for Helen.
Tell me who else you met.
Sorry, that's classified. Helen closed her eyes and lifted her face to the sun. What are you going to do when the war's over? Will you go back to the law firm you worked for before this mess began?
I don't think I could. We've seen and done so much. I can't imagine returning to the lives we had. I like army life and might consider staying in. What about you?
If all goes well, I'll be returning to France and getting married.
Oh, you've met someone.
Is he French? Yes, but the war isn't over yet and nothing's certain.
If you do marry a Frenchman, your grandmother will be delighted. I hope it all works out for you.
Me too. What about you? Have you met anyone special?
Quite a few special men have come into my life, but I have no plans to marry again. I might one day, but at the moment I can't see any chance of that happening.
Not even James? He seems fond of you, and you of him.
Grace shook her head. We're friends now, and that's all. I have some sad news for you, Helen. I should have told you before, but didn't want to spoil your homecoming. Tim was killed during the invasion.
Oh, that's terrible.
Helen was clearly shocked. He was such a likeable boy. James must be devastated. He was very upset when he came and told me. Let's hope the war's over soon to stop all this senseless killing of young men. Amen to that. But I really don't think it'll be this year. Winter's fast approaching, and that could make things even harder. So it looks as if we will have to wait until next year. Most likely. The men out there have a huge task on their hands, and crossing the Rhine into Germany won't be easy. I expect you saw a lot of the fighting while you were there. Do your family know where you've been all this time? I haven't said anything, of course, and they haven't asked, but they must have guessed. I did consider staying to the end, but there wasn't a lot more I could do. The escape route I was working on was no longer needed. Is that what you were doing, most of the time? I was one link in a very long chain to help downed airmen get back home. Did you help Tim? I always felt he knew something about you but wasn't letting on. Helen nodded. He was brought to us. It is sad to find out he was killed after all that. Yes, it's tragic. Grace sighed. So it looks as if we'll both have to wait and watch, hoping for the fighting to end soon, and when it does, the work of rebuilding shattered countries and lives will begin. The problem of displaced persons will be enormous. If I stay in the army, I might be able to help in some way. Don't commit yourself yet, Grace. They might put pressure on you to sign up for years. But wait, and see how things work out. Do you remember in the beginning how we wanted to do something worthwhile and had no idea what that could be? I do, and I believe we have done that in ways we never imagined. We have, and that's why I'm urging you to wait. Something quite unexpected might come up, and you'll need to be free at that point. Grace smiled at her friend. You have changed. Before the war, I was always the one urging caution. I had a job to stop you running headlong into things. I've had to learn to sum up a situation carefully before taking action. But then, none of us will ever be the same. Will we? Change was inevitable, and perhaps that isn't a bad thing. Some of the things we've had to face have hopefully made us stronger to cope with whatever life throws at us. I'm sure they have. It seems strange to be sitting here talking about the end of the war. It's been going on for so long, it's become our entire life. Grace nodded. Did we have a life before the world went crazy? It's hard to remember what it was like. If I cast my mind back, I think it was happy, carefree, and the only problem we had was what picture to go and see. I'm sure it wasn't quite like that. Grace laughed. Nice way to remember it, though. Helen grinned and pulled Grace to her feet. Let's walk again and see how many times you get saluted. They set off, smiling happily, the serious conversation pushed aside, and just glad to see each other again. Chapter 30. Christmas 1944 came and went. There had been an air of hope and expectancy that the coming year would finally see the end of the war in Europe. Grace stopped on her way to the camp to admire clumps of primroses on a grassy bank, dancing in the March breeze. It was as if they were saying, "Look at us. There is still beauty to be seen." Such a small thing, but it lifted Grace's spirits. The constant stream of information now coming in told of mass bombing, fierce fighting, and terrible atrocities being uncovered. There was no sign of Stan when she arrived, so she settled down to deal with the pile of reports on her desk. An hour later he arrived. "I've just heard some good news. The Allies have crossed the Rhine. The Nazis are finished, Grace. It can only be a matter of weeks now." "Oh, that is good news. It'll be such a relief when the fighting's over." "It's been a long, hard war." Stan stood by her desk. "Have you made any plans for the future?" "Not really." "I'm going to ask you not to rush to get demobbed. There's going to be a great deal to do, and your language skills will be useful." He gave a lopsided grin. "I could see that you are promoted again." "No, thank you, sir." Grace laughed at the expression on his face. "Captain is fine for me. I promise I won't do anything hasty. I've been considering staying in the army anyway, so I'll wait and see what happens." "Good." When he disappeared into his office, Grace shook her head in amusement. She certainly didn't want another promotion. If she did decide to stay in the ATS, there could be a time when she had to return to a woman's outfit, and a higher rank might make it difficult for her. Of course, the intelligence service could ask her to stay, but she wasn't going to bank on that. Her options would need careful consideration, but they had to finish the war first. That finally happened on May the 7th, when Germany surrendered unconditionally, and May the 8th was declared VE Day. The country went wild. Hitler was dead, and the long years of war were over. People were dancing in the streets, and there were celebrations going on everywhere. Helen and Grace were both on leave, so they made their way to Trafalgar Square to join in the fun. As it got dark, lights were turned on everywhere. After years of making sure not even a crack of light showed, it was a wonderful sight. "Hey, Captain!" A laughing Canadian soldier caught Grace and spun her round. "Will you and your friend help me and my buddies to celebrate? Where can we go to get a drink? Somewhere nice, because we wouldn't take an officer to a dump."
Grace!
Helen appeared with the soldier's friend. "Come on, we're going to the Savoy Hotel. It'll be packed. So will everywhere, but we'll get in all right." The Canadian let out a piercing whistle, and 4 more of their friends appeared.
"These beautiful girls are taking us somewhere we can get a drink."
Another piercing whistle brought over 2 more soldiers, and by the time they reached the hotel, they'd acquired 3 British, 2 French and 4 Americans, all looking for a place to get a drink and have a party. Grace had been right. The place was packed. But everyone was in such a good mood that no one complained when they pushed their way in. Somehow, the soldiers managed to get to the bar and order drinks. Their group had grown even larger in that time. The drinks arrived with 2 British soldiers, 2 sailors and an airman. The noise was deafening, and it was almost impossible to hear what anyone said. A glass of champagne was put on the table in front of her, and when she looked up to thank the person, she leapt to her feet in delight.
"James! Helen, James is here!"
Grace hugged him, and Helen pushed her out of the way to take her turn.
"Hey, you know each other?" One of the Canadians slapped James on the back. "Join us. We're going to have one hell of a party tonight." "There are 4 of us. Well, bring them all over. The more the merrier, they say."
It was dawn before Grace and Helen made their way back home. They were tired, and their sides ached from laughing so much. It had been an hilarious night.
"Hope no one salutes me, because I'd fall over if I tried to salute back."
Grace giggled, and that set them off laughing again.
"It was good to see James there, wasn't it, Grace? I noticed you managed to have a talk with him. Was he offering you a job with him again?" "There is a job for me at the law firm if I want it, but James has decided to stay in the Air Force. Flying has always been his passion, so he's going to make that his career, for the time being anyway. I don't blame him. Now the war's finally over, I expect many people are deciding what they're going to do." "Good heavens," Grace exclaimed when they reached their street. "Everyone's still up, and lights are blazing in every window. The war in Europe really is over."
They didn't crawl out of bed until midday. Everyone else was still asleep, so Grace and Helen sat in the kitchen working their way through a pot of strong tea.
"I'm going back to France in 2 days' time, Grace."
"So soon?"
"Yes.
I need to check on some people to see they're all right, and several of our group were captured. I want to find out what happened to them if possible. Then I'll go to Paris to meet up with Maurice."
"Is that the man you're going to marry?"
Helen nodded. "We arranged this before I left France. His home is there, and he's waiting for me."
"What's he like? You haven't said much about him. Do you have a photo?"
"Sorry, no photos, and you'll have to wait until you meet him to see what he's like. I think he's gorgeous."
"I'm sure you do,"
Grace teased. "I'll give you my opinion when I see him."
"Will you marry here?"
"No, in France, and we'll be living there. My family is so excited about that, and Grandmother is thrilled. Of course, she can't stop smiling."
"Of course she can't. Her favourite granddaughter is marrying a Frenchman and going to live in the country of her birth. I hope you'll have room for me to come and visit, providing Maurice agrees, of course."
"He will be delighted. We shall expect you to come often, and we'll visit you wherever you end up."
"If I do stay in the army, I could be posted anywhere, but I'll write every week."
"Me too." Helen smiled at her friend. So, our adventure continues with a new life for both of us. Not the one we could possibly have imagined, but here's to a peaceful and happy future. They raised the teacups in salute. It had been hard saying goodbye to Helen, knowing they were now going their separate ways. They had been constant companions from the time they were born, except for the years apart during the war. But Grace was happy for a friend. She deserved a lot of happiness after what she had done. 2 weeks had passed since VE Day, and Grace had now made up her mind to stay in the ATS. Stan swept into the office. "Go and pack a bag. We're off to Berlin tomorrow. Make sure you've got your dress uniform and an evening frock. Nip home and get one if you have to." "I don't have anything like that," she protested. "I haven't needed dressy clothes for a long time, sir." "You'd better go and buy one then." "Where? I don't have any clothing coupons." "I never thought of that. I'll see what I can sort out, and don't leave the office for a while yet." He disappeared into his office and closed the door. Grace smiled and went back to work. What on earth was he on about? Her dress uniform would be appropriate for anything they might attend. The last time she'd worn an elegant gown had been when she'd been posing as an SS officer's girlfriend. Never mind about that, though. They were going to Berlin, and that was an exciting prospect. An hour later, the office door burst open and piles of boxes walked in. At least, that's what it looked like, because the man carrying them could hardly be seen. A woman guided him to the desk, where he dropped the boxes just as Stan came out of his office. "Where's the young lady you want me to dress, Stanley?" "Standing right beside you, Gregory." Gregory turned his full attention to Grace, frowning as he walked round her. "Stand still, dear," he ordered, when she tried to keep him in view. Dear, these uniforms don't do anything for the female form. Take off your jacket, dear." If he said dear once more, she would slosh him, Grace decided. "My name is Captain Grace Lincoln." "Very nice, dear. Now, remove your jacket, please, dear." Grace spun round to face Stan, and was even more annoyed to see he was finding it difficult not to dissolve into helpless laughter. "Who is this man, sir?" "A designer." "A designer?" Gregory squeaked, highly offended. "I dress the best, the beautiful, and the highest in the land. I could make a hippopotamus look elegant." This was ridiculous. Grace's annoyance faded a little as she began to see the funny side, and couldn't resist teasing this man with such a high opinion of himself. "You are too modest." "Ah, sadly that is one of my faults." He broke into a smile, as if she paid him a compliment. "But I'm sure we can do something with you, don't you think, Adele?" "You will work your usual magic, Gregory. The hair is pretty, what we can see of it, and she has good bone structure." Gregory reached out and expertly removed the pins from Grace's hair, letting it tumble around her shoulders. Promising, but it depends on the figure hidden by that terrible uniform. Take it off, dear." "I'm not getting undressed in here." "Use my office," Stan offered, quickly stepping aside. "I'll see no one comes in." "Bring the top 2 boxes in, Stanley," Gregory ordered as he swept into the other office. As Grace passed Stan, she hissed quietly, "You'll suffer for this, sir." The boxes were immediately put on the desk, and as the door closed behind Stan, she could hear him laughing. She endured another critical scrutiny, and many dears, before Gregory came to a decision. "Red, I think. Yes, red. It's in the top box, Adele. I thought that might be the one from the description Stanley gave me." Grace was horrified. "I'm not wearing red." "I'm not suggesting scarlet, dear, but a deep ruby red. You have a hint of red in your hair, which is quite glorious, by the way. It's a crime to have it screwed up like you do." "Army regulations." "Yes, well, they have their rules, I suppose, but you must wear it down when you can. Oh, here is the gown." He took it from his assistant and held it up against Grace. "Quite perfect. Let's hope Stanley guessed your size correctly. We haven't time for major alterations." Adele helped Grace into the gown, and it fitted perfectly. Then there was another lengthy examination. "Shoes, Adele. You have a decent height, around 5 feet 7 or 8, but we'll make you a little taller. The gold strappy ones, Adele. What size are you, dear?" 6. Grace was looking down at the gown, wishing there was a mirror in the office. It was lovely and very comfortable. But she was sure he'd made a mistake with the colour. She never wore red, and what on earth were they going to be doing in Berlin for Stan to insist she had something like this? The shoes also fitted, making her around 3 inches taller. "Walk up and down, dear." He watched to see how the gown moved around the hem. Quite a transformation, don't you think, Adele? She has good posture. "Perfect, Gregory. Your choice of gown and colour is impeccable as ever." He bristled with pride at the compliment. "Go and show Stanley, dear." Feeling rather self-conscious, Grace walked into the other office. "Here is your Cinderella, Stanley. Does she meet with your approval?" "My word, you look beautiful, and that colour's stunning on you. Well done, Gregory." "It was a pleasure, Stanley. Oh, and do try not to clutter it up too much with army decorations, or whatever." He collected up the boxes and headed for the door. "Wait a minute." Grace stopped him. "How much does all this cost? I'm positive I can't afford it." "You don't have to, dear," Gregory informed her. "It's all been taken care of." Grace stared at the door after he'd left, and then spun round to face Stan. What did he mean? Who's paying for this? The gown must cost a fortune, and I dread to think how expensive the shoes are. I can't allow someone else to pay for them. If I can't afford them myself, then they must be returned. Gregory owed me a favour, so stop fretting and just enjoy the clothes. You're going to have to blend in with some important people and their wives. What on earth are we going to be doing in Berlin? Working. Now, get changed and go and pack. We're leaving at 5 in the morning. Stan opened the door to leave and looked back. I shall be proud to be your escort, though I doubt I shall have that pleasure for long. See you in the morning, dear. I've got to stop over in Paris, Stan told Grace when they were waiting for the transport plane. Oh, Helen's there. She's going to marry a Frenchman, and I haven't met him yet. Would there be time for a quick visit, sir? I have the address. I'm sure we could fit it in if the meeting doesn't last too long, and I'll come with you. Thank you, sir. Grace boarded the plane with a smile on her face, excited about the visit. When they arrived, they went straight to the meeting, which, fortunately, only lasted 2 hours. Right. Stan glanced at his watch. They've provided us with transport. But it will only be a quick visit. Our plane for Berlin leaves at 4 o'clock. The driver knew Paris well, and they were soon outside a smart building, and Grace hoped Helen and Maurice were in. It would be a shame to miss this opportunity to see them. The apartment they wanted was on the 1st floor, and Grace almost danced with relief when Helen opened the door. What a lovely surprise! Helen hugged Grace and shook hands with Stan. Come in. What are you doing in Paris? We're on our way to Berlin, but we had to stop over for a meeting. This is only a flying visit, I'm afraid, Stan explained. Maurice, look who's here, Helen called. When he came into the room, Grace stared at him in astonishment. Harry! Hello, Grace. He held out his arms, and she rushed to hug him. You two have been playing games with me, haven't you? But this is wonderful. They were both laughing at the surprise that had sprung on Grace, and Helen said, You promised to tell me what you thought of him. He's gorgeous, of course. Harry turned to Stan and shook his hand. Good to see you again. Can you stay for dinner? That isn't possible, but another time, perhaps. You will always be welcome, Stan. Bring Bill with you sometime. I'll do that. They could only stay for an hour, and were soon heading back to the airfield and on their way to Berlin. Chapter 31. There used to be a good cafe just there. It was cheap and the meals enormous. Just what us young boys needed. Dan glanced at the man who'd come to stand beside him. Bill, I'm pleased to see you made it. You too. Your office told me where to find you. Bill looked around and shook his head. What a mess. It's hard to find the places I once knew so well. I agree. I've been walking the streets for the last couple of hours and the place is unrecognisable. And to add to the chaos, the city's been divided up between the Allies. Churchill and Roosevelt had to come up with a plan acceptable to all of the Allies, and you can bet that wasn't easy. Damn shame Roosevelt didn't live to see the end of the war. Yes, it is. But dividing the city up like this makes me uneasy. This could be a recipe for trouble in the future. That's why I'm staying here for a while. What about you?
I'm on my way home soon, but I'll probably be back at some time. Dan began walking, and Bill fell into step beside him. The rebuilding of Europe is going to be an enormous task. People are scattered all over the place with nowhere to go. It's tragic. The cost was high, but the Nazis had to be stopped from taking over Europe. If they'd defeated Britain, then there was no telling where they would have stopped. Yes, it had to be done. Dan stopped in front of a ruined building. I had a friend who lived here. Wonder what happened to him and his family. They were nice people, but then they might have been seduced by Hitler and become ardent Nazis. I don't think walking these shattered streets, remembering the past, is a good idea, Bill. Come back with me and I'll buy you a drink. We can toast our good fortune in surviving. You're on. Bill grinned. Stan's on his way here and he's bringing Grace with him. Yes, I know. Of course you do. Did you arrange it? Me? Why would I do such a thing? Remind me never to play poker with you. Bill laughed. I see you've been bumped up to brigadier and have been given a medal for the way you saved your men and got them back to the rest of the troops. That medal belongs to a young SOE girl who saved us from being slaughtered. I've put in a report to make damn sure she gets one as well. There was also a Frenchman with her who spoke perfect English, but I don't have any details about him. Dan glanced at Bill. I'm hoping you can help me there. He knew you. That sounds like Harry. I don't know his real name, but I'll try and find out for you. Thanks. I'd appreciate that. Let's get that drink. The officers' mess wasn't busy, and they'd just been served with drinks when Stan marched in. Good, you're here. I'm glad to see you both in one piece. Stan looked at their glasses of beer and grimaced. Mine's a double whiskey, Dan. Bill was on his feet, staring at the door. Where's my Grace? You didn't come without her, did you? I left her to settle in with the women. You'll see her tonight, and she isn't your Grace. I can dream, can't I? How is she? The same as ever, continually asking questions and telling me how to do my job. She's damn good army material. Dan laughed softly and got up to order Stan's drink and another 2 beers. That's better, Stan declared, when the drink was put in front of him. Tell me who's coming to this gathering tonight. Representatives of all the Allies, their wives and guests. It's a diplomatic exercise, Bill explained. The idea is to get everyone together so they can be nice and friendly over a few drinks. Stan gave a cynical laugh. With all of them in the same room, it means we shall have to be on our best behaviour. Good job I've got Grace with me. I believe she's been used to this kind of thing when she worked for James. You'd never believe the trouble I had persuading her to let Gregory find her a suitable gown. I thought she was going to throw him out the office. Stan, you didn't. Not Gregory. Bill shook his head before bursting into laughter. I wish I'd been there. It was quite hilarious. Stan was also laughing now. He kept calling her dear, and you can imagine how she reacted to that. Dan, you would have to meet the man to understand. Anyway, his choice was impeccable, and she looked lovely when he'd finished. I can't wait to see her again. Bill glanced across at Dan. It'll be a pleasure for all of us. Stan finished his drink and stood up. I'd better go and unpack now. We'll see you tonight. There was a rap on the door, and when Dan opened it, he found Bill standing outside. Stan isn't ready yet, so I thought we might as well go together. I'm part of the reception group, so I have to be there early. Well, that's all right. It'll give me a chance to sum up the situation and perhaps try out my Russian. Dan stepped aside to let Bill in. You speak Russian as well. Is there anything you can't do? Let me see. Oh, yes, I don't have much luck finding a nice girl who will settle down with me. You'll never settle down. Dan buttoned up his jacket and made sure his appearance was in order. Perhaps you're right. Bill followed Dan out, and as they marched along, he said, How long is it since you've seen Grace? The last time was at a party to celebrate my return to my regiment. But that was years ago. Are you telling me you haven't met her since? I am. I haven't seen her for 4 years. Why, for heaven's sake? And don't tell me you're not interested, because I know differently. I had my reasons, Dan replied as they walked into the building. I'll be busy for a while, but I'll see you later. You can buy me a drink. I might need it. Bill grinned,
and walked into the room to see who had turned up early. Grace was nervous, which was surprising. She'd done this kind of thing many times before. They'd all been lawyers, barristers and judges then. Tonight it would be officers and politicians from different countries, but not something she should find daunting. There would be people there she knew, and Stan had told her George had just arrived. It would be lovely to see him again, and Bill. Would Dan be there? She hadn't asked, and why should she? Not once in all these years had he bothered to contact her, but she'd worried about him, as well as all the others. The fact that he just walked away without a glance back had hurt. They'd worked well together for that short time, and had fun. He'd declared that they were friends, but friends kept in touch. And why on earth was all this nonsense coming into her head now? There was a knock on the door, and Stan called out, "Time to go, Grace." "I'm ready. Come in, sir." He nodded approval when he saw her. "Stick with me tonight. I might need your skill with languages. My French is passable, but I never could master German." "I won't let you out of my sight," she promised. "I must make the most of tonight," he told her, as they walked to the venue, "because I've just had orders through that you won't be working for me anymore." "Why?" she asked, not pleased with that sudden news. "Where am I going? Why are they moving me?" "Questions," Stan sighed. "You've been transferred to another officer." "Who?" "You'll meet him tonight." Grace didn't like the sound of this, but couldn't ask more questions, because they had arrived. "Smile, dear." He laughed softly. "Gregory would be proud of the way you look in one of his gowns, even if we have had to add a couple of things to make it clear you're an officer. I still think my dress uniform would have been suitable." They stopped by the sergeant major who was announcing the arrivals, and Grace looked into the hall. It was already crowded, and all the women were wearing evening gowns. "See what I mean?" Stan whispered. "It's hardly appropriate in the middle of war-torn Europe," she complained. "This evening is purely a diplomatic affair, and I'm sure you know what they're like." "Yes, I do," she had to agree, as they reached the sergeant major. He raised his voice to announce the arrival of Major General Hayden and Captain Lincoln. Pinning a smile on her face, Grace entered the room with Stan. When he heard the names, Dan slowly turned his head towards the door and was shocked at his reaction to seeing Grace again after so long. He felt as if he'd been kicked, hard. This wasn't the young girl he had laughed with and manhandled over the army assault course. This was a woman who had grown through all she'd experienced and held herself with elegance and confidence. Grace was the right name for her. She moved along the line, quietly helping Stan with the languages when needed. When she reached Dan, he smiled. "Hello, Grace." "Good evening, Brigadier," was all she said, and continued walking. At that moment he knew he'd made a mistake. He'd been so sure he was doing the right thing. He was a damned fool. As soon as everyone had arrived, and his job on the reception committee was finished, Dan found Bill. "I'll have that drink now, and make it a strong one." "Oh, someone isn't happy. Doesn't Grace look beautiful?" She was like that in France, and the German officers were tripping over themselves to meet her. She provided the distraction I needed to slip away unnoticed. I couldn't have done it without her. "Was she pleased to see you?" Bill asked innocently. Her greeting was as warm and welcoming as an Arctic storm. "Are you going to get me that drink?" Dan snapped. "At once, sir." Bill soon returned with a large brandy and watched the tall man empty the glass in 2 swigs. "Feel better now?" Dan gave a wry smile. "No, but I'd better not drink any more of that stuff. I need to keep a clear head." "So, our Grace is mad at you. What are you going to do about it? I only ask because if you're going to give up—" "Don't even think about it, Bill." "Why the devil didn't you step in when you had the chance, Dan?" "That's just what I'm asking myself." Dan looked at his empty glass and grimaced as he put it down. "Oh well, one more battle to fight." Dan strode across the room until he reached Grace, Stan and George. "Ah, Dan, quite a crowd gathered here." Stan turned to Grace. "Meet your new boss." Just for a moment her eyes blazed, then her composure returned and she inclined her head in acknowledgement. Dan admired her self-control. She was clearly not at all happy about being assigned to him. But she was in the army and had to obey orders. I'll expect her in my office by 8 o'clock tomorrow. Yes, sir. Chapter 32. That night, Grace tossed and turned, ashamed of the way she'd acted towards Dan. There was no reason why he should have kept in touch with her. They'd worked together for only a few weeks, and then had gone their separate ways. She'd admired his determination to get fit enough to return to his regiment, and his kindness and understanding had helped her through those painful weeks after Brian had been killed. He had greeted her tonight with obvious pleasure and used her Christian name. And what had she done? She had insulted him. And now she knew why. She thumped her pillow in exasperation. Over the years she'd listened to George, Bill and Stan talking about him and what he was doing, and she'd pretended not to care. But the moment she'd seen him tonight, the truth had become clear. Gradually, bit by bit, she had fallen in love with him. The first thing she had to do in the morning was apologise without letting him know about her feelings for him. This would be too embarrassing for both of them. If he'd wanted to take their friendship any further, he would have contacted her. 4 years of silence told her everything she needed to know. The morning finally came, and Grace followed the instructions she'd been given to find his office. A young girl was already there, but before Grace could say anything, Dan came out of his office. "Punctual as always," he said briskly. "There's a desk in my office you can use." He held the door open for her and closed it behind them. She turned to face him. "Sir, I must apologise for my conduct towards you last night." He took a step towards her and then stopped, his gaze sweeping over her tired face. "Go ahead, then." He was clearly angry and wasn't going to make this easy for her. And why should he? "I'm sorry I spoke to you so sharply. It was rude of me, and I'm ashamed. I can offer no reasonable excuse for my lack of manners. I apologise, sir." "Cut out the sir, Grace, and tell me what the blazes that was all about." "For some reason I was angry you hadn't bothered to contact me even once over the last 4 years. That was so absolutely ridiculous, for you had no reason to do so. I can see that now." He demanded an explanation, and she hoped that was good enough, because she really couldn't say more without giving herself away. He took another step forward. "I couldn't. I didn't dare see you again." "That doesn't make sense. George kept in touch. So did James and Bill. Did I do something wrong when we worked together?" "Of course not. I count those weeks as some of the best I have ever spent." Now Grace was completely at a loss to understand what he was saying. "Then why did you walk away? The last thing you said to me was that we were friends, and I felt as if we had indeed become friends." "Then I'd better explain. But you might not like what I'm going to tell you. If it embarrasses you, tell me, and I'll never mention it again." Now Grace was worried. "Whatever it is, I think you had better tell me." "When you came to work with me, I was not happy. I had lost men in France. I was injured and stuck in a desk job. But you worked quietly, efficiently, and never once complained. Your husband had only recently been killed, and when I saw how courageous you were in dealing with the pain, it helped me to sort my own feelings out. I very quickly realised something else. I had fallen in love with you." Grace gasped. This was the last thing she'd expected. He gave a wry smile at her reaction. "It shocked me as well. And I couldn't do a damned thing about it, because you were grieving for the loss of a husband you had loved. When I returned to my regiment, I knew I would be off fighting again somewhere, and there was always the chance I wouldn't survive." He was right in front of her now. "That is the reason I stayed away, Grace. I loved you too much to inflict something like that on you again. This war has made it impossible for me to ask you out, take you to restaurants for intimate dinners, or spend long days together.
My love for you has not changed over the long years of separation. And I want you in my life. Whether it's as a friend, lover, or as my wife, it's up to you. I hope it will be the latter. But the choice is yours. Her head was spinning. Now she understood why he'd kept away. He'd only been thinking of her. Which of the three is it to be, Grace? He asked, when she didn't answer. She looked up at him, moisture filling her eyes. It has taken me a long time to realise that I love you, but I do. And the third option sounds perfect. He immediately closed the remaining space between them and gathered her in his arms. When the long, passionate embrace came to an end, he whispered, "Thank heavens. I really thought I didn't stand a chance after staying away for so long. But you had needed a couple of years to recover from your loss. And by then I was in the desert fighting. I had to wait." "You took a chance. I might have married in that time." "It was a risk I felt I had to take. I watched your progress through the war, and I must admit you gave me some scary times, but you came through uninjured and still single. As soon as the fighting was over, I knew I had to get us together again as quickly as possible." "So you arranged for me to come here?" Dan nodded. "We will be returning to England in 2 days' time, and a month later I will be posted back to Berlin. It will be a rush, I know. But would you agree to put in for De Mob so we can marry, quickly? As a civilian and my wife, I can arrange for us to have married quarters here." "Can you do that?" "I'm an officer and good at giving orders." "Ah, I know that only too well," she laughed. He smiled down at her. "I'm not giving orders now. I'm asking. How do you feel about leaving the army?" "I did consider staying because I had no idea what to do with my life now the war's over." She reached up and kissed him. "I didn't know you were going to ask me to marry you. I'll put in for De Mob as soon as we arrive home. We've wasted enough time." He gave a sigh of relief. "Oh, thank you, my love. It's been a long wait, and I thought this day would never come. But I endeavoured to take each day as it came, and that got me through." "That was the only way to get through the long, dreadful war," Grace agreed. "But now, this day is ours." You have been listening to The Day Will Come. It was written by Beryl Matthews and read by Annie Aldington. Other recordings by Beryl Matthews include Two Strangers, A Debt from the Past, and A New Day. This has been a Soundings Audiobooks presentation. If you have enjoyed this production, please write to us at Isis House, Kings Drive, Whitley Bay, Tyne and Wear, NE26 2JT, or call 0191 253 4155, or visit our website www.isis-publishing.co.uk, and you'll be sent a full list of our recordings.